We'll call to order the special meeting of the Eastpointe City Council on Wednesday, May 1st at 6 p.m. Please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico.
Here.
Lucido.
Here.
Kleinfeld.
Here.
Owens.
Here.
Mayor Pixley.
Here. First item is to approve the agenda as presented. Does anyone have anything to add?
So moved.
Support.
Moved in support, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kleinfeld.
Yes.
Lucido.
Yes.
Owens.
Yes.
Pixley.
Yes.
DeMonico.
Yes.
Move to the hearing of the public. Does anyone wish to be heard? Dr. Ehrlich.
Hello, Dr. Shaniva Early, Eastpointe Community School Board member. I have one question or a statement, I don't know. The presentation last night about the student police officer in the school, under one of the slides it said adequate, but it had no student officer. And so I want to know, how is that adequate? Because if we don't have a student officer, it's not adequate. We need somebody who can be present in the schools, so then when things happen, they can be right there on the spot, and it'll be much better for our school, the children, and the police to come be together. And so I just don't understand that part. I need to understand, how is it adequate when we still don't get a resource officer, an officer for the school. And then if we do get an officer for the school, first of all, we don't have enough to pay the teachers, so we can't pay an officer. But if we have an officer, how can we pay an officer and then he get to go on Saturday, Sunday working somewhere else, and we help and pay him for that? Like, it doesn't make sense. So if we're at capacity now, if we hire another person, traffic is important, but schools are very important. Robbery is important, but our schools are very important. We need to prioritize some stuff, in my opinion, that we have not been doing. And if traffic is good, I mean, I understand it might pay for itself, but our children is our future, and they need to be the ones that have somebody in there to get care. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing none, the first hearing of the public is closed. We'll move on to discussion of the fiscal year 2019-20 proposed budget, and I would assume that we're going to be moving to Mr. Sabota.
How about Director Sterling for the library?
That's fine. So if you would like to come forward and talk about your budget.
Yes.
It's pretty much a maintenance budget, except we are putting in for the half year to hire another full-time librarian, because I will be retiring at the end of the next this upcoming fiscal year, and the assistant director will then have about a year and a half before she can, and she may. And so we want someone in place to sort of make that transition better, to have someone with experience in our library to be in there, so within a year and a half of us both leaving, we have some experience there. And that's probably the only major change. That and the capital improvement of the heating and cooling system, which in half the building is ancient. They can't even get parts for it. It needs to be replaced. And it's been constantly repaired over the last couple of years. So those are the two changes, really.
All right, anyone have any questions?
So that's why the personnel services went up, because you're trying to hire?
I'm sorry, I really have a hard time hearing right now.
That's okay, sorry about that. Is that why the budget for next year is a little bit higher?
Yes.
Because of that extra person?
The extra person and the capital.
Okay, yes. Okay.
Anyone have any questions?
Anything else?
Any programs you're switching up, or everything worked out well this year? Or?
Everything worked out well, and our programming is all funded by the Friends, so It's not a budgetary. We
Oh,
change them up all the time and.
I was just curious now since no one else had questions. I wanted to ask you a question.
We have a couple
No.
new programs for adults. We now have a mystery book club and a
Er,
sci-fi fantasy book.
And another one, you
Okay.
have 3 adult book clubs.
Yes. Because our regular one is very popular, so you added 2 different ones.
I do have a question. That computerized game that you
The
have,
game table that
Right.
we're working toward.
that you're working towards, I know you've told me that you have a grant that you can kick into, or,
Well, we have the library has a trust account. Is that what it is?
Yes.
So some of it's coming
Yes.
from there, the rest the friends are raising right now. We're in the
so
process.
I was wondering what the balance is, and
For what the
I'm
friends need.
kind of thinking that maybe, because we don't do very much to the library because you have your own millage and all, that maybe it might be a thought to bring that account up to when the trust would kick in. So like it would be maybe $1,000 or something.
No, we're taking half of what the table value is out of the trust. The friends are raising the rest.
So the total on the gaming table was how much?
It's about 7,000 with everything, the table, the software, and the seating around it.
How much have you raised so far?
Well, the friends have raised $1,500. It might be closer to 1,800 now, because we have people buying bricks, and that money's going toward the table also. So we were surprised how quickly we've gotten as much money as we have, especially the can and bottle drive. It's amazing.
So what was the goal for the Friends to raise before
$3,500 to $4,000.
before the,
But 3,500, we can order it and get it started. And so,
and you have just under 2,000?
yeah,
So it would be like $1,200
yeah, that would be,
that you would have that table?
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, you can go home. You've been at work all day.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
All right, now, Mr. Sabota?
I guess I don't have anyone else to defer to around here.
Where are you going to start?
I might as well start at the beginning, page 76. That would be the Office of the City Manager.
Okay.
That's strange. Okay, in the prior year budget, all costs related to civil service in terms of testing for all the various offices were expensed under the city manager's account.
Those costs are now being distributed to the appropriate departments, so that way those department costs are accurately reflected.
So that is reflected in this budget document. Also, we have separated any costs relating to personnel in its own separate department, and that would be the costs for the labor attorney, which presently fell under the city attorney. Those have been moved under personnel. Also, once again, I am placing the question for the position of a personnel director in the budget. That would be to relieve me of some of the responsibilities so that I can concentrate more on the city clerk and the city manager functions. Also, I think it's good to have someone in City Hall that can sort of serve as a buffer between management and employees in the event of, we'll call those human resource issues, where they may not feel comfortable coming to their department head or directly to the city manager, but rather having someone to talk to in the HR field. Those are a couple of the reasons for the proposed split.
Joseph, have you looked into contracting with a company to do the HR function? I'm thinking, I mean, for me, the biggest part was having someone for employees to work with, or maybe, you know, benefits kind of questions included too, or something like that. I imagine there's companies that do that sort of thing, probably be a lot cheaper, and then it wouldn't be a full-time thing. I think you should be dealing with a lot of personnel, like hiring and all that, so I don't know what the other functions would be that'd be a full-time position.
Well, there's annual reviews of personnel policies that need to be done. There's new policies that need to be drafted. On interviews, I don't necessarily need to be in on the interviews as long as there is someone in on the interviews who has the personnel HR qualifications. Many communities that have separate HR directors do not have the HR director in on the interview process. That's usually reserved for the manager at the very end if necessary to make decisions. Obviously, we need that. I think it would be extremely helpful to have someone in between, and having someone on site makes that matter a little bit easier. In the past, we did, in another community, subcontract payroll, and I'm not going there, but when you subcontract payroll, you still do the work, but they're the ones that get paid for it. You still have to pretty much do the same thing that a payroll person does, but you've subcontracted payroll. It just doesn't work. And I'm equating that to the concept of HR. Well, you're still going to have to do the work, but someone else sort of pretties it up type of deal. I have not put that out for bid or explored the possibilities. I've had bad experiences on the payroll side, and it is one of those types of companies that supports HR and payroll because they do both. And if the HR side works the same way as the payroll side, there's no benefit, other than the fact that the liability per se may be shifted. In terms of a payroll, it was, well, if the tax forms don't get filed on time, well, the payroll company's responsible, not the city. And that's really what we were paying for at that particular time. It's something that could be explored, but I just don't see the benefit of it. It's good to have another body, if you will, in the office that you could bounce ideas off of as well. In a lot of communities that have a professional manager form of government, your assistant city manager is your HR director. It doesn't work here because our assistant city manager is our deputy city clerk, and I am the city clerk, so we're tied up with the clerk functions, and we really don't have that time to devote to the HR functions.
So I have a question. Would it be more financially, if we hired a deputy city clerk, or made one of our clerks right now a deputy city clerk, and then had the assistant city manager take over HR?
That's not permitted by charter. By charter, the deputy city clerk is the assistant city manager. If we could get a charter revision, that would be great, but that's potentially 3 to 4 years off.
We could possibly just change one line, put it up for a ballot review.
That's a possibility as well, but right now I'm bringing in a assistant city manager who has city clerk credentials. That's what I'm looking for in the 3 candidates that are going for the assessment center.
But your assistant city clerk, according to the description, the job description that was filed, also has to have a financial background.
Yes.
What are you requiring of that deputy city clerk?
That person will also be responsible for being purchasing agent, most likely, and potentially working on some of the bank reconciliations.
The bank reconciliation?
Bank reconciliations. That way we have a good separation of duties between the finance people who work in the general ledger and those who open the bank statements and make deposits, so it's for an internal control purpose.
I don't understand, in an MPA program, do they have the finance training that you're requiring for that?
Yes, I was required to go for accounting in my graduate schools.
I'm a little confused on why we would move that over into the city manager's office, because last year we agreed to hire a deputy finance director. I thought that was to help over there in the finance part of it, so why now do they need even more help in finance by sending that over to city manager department?
Internal control, separation of duties.
But if you have a deputy finance director, isn't that person?
No, you still have, because the deputy finance director is going to be working in the general ledger, just like we have the accountant right now working in the general ledger. So you have the person who's making the adjustments, balancing the books.
there's an internal control weakness there.
So what are you gonna do with Lori's position? Because she does a great deal of the HR recruiting and so.
It's actually going to relieve a lot of burden from that position. That's more of a support position. I need someone with a higher level skill set that can do the personnel policy review, create the new policies. That's really what the HR person will be doing most of the time, as well as assisting with the preparation of the job description reviews, et cetera. There are several HR functions that we're just not getting to that we should be getting to on a regular basis.
Well, I think that the personnel policies are, those are administrative policies, and I think that should come from the city manager. And when it comes to changing personnel policies, part of the reason we have Brandon is he lets us know when there's changes in the law and when we have a certain policy we have to update. We just had one where we posted, I think it had to do with, I can't remember.
Paid leave for part-time.
Yeah.
Right,
paid
I was
leave.
the one who initiated that, and I asked him to get involved in that. But that came from my initiation. I have tasked him to review our current rules and regulations to see if there needs to be any updates. Obviously, there will be. But until that was assigned to him, he was not doing that. There is nothing proactive coming out of our labor attorney. Everything that he does, we assign. We don't want to have an attorney on the clock openly. Also, it's good to have someone, we're going into contract negotiations, and it's good to have another HR person in on the negotiating team from an HR standpoint as well.
I guess I'm just a little concerned because, I'm sorry, Monique. Because looking back, like in the future years, going back to even like 2009, we didn't have that position, but we had even more employees at that time, and that position wasn't a necessary position at that time. So I guess I'm kind of confused on why it's necessary.
I would disagree. I would say that the position was necessary because the tasks that should have been done were not being done, and they still aren't being done. I'm looking at some of my neighbors here in Macomb County, and yes, they may hold 2 jobs, but not 3. I'm holding 3 jobs, 3 responsibilities. Most of the city managers only have 2, and they would be personnel and management. I'm also the city clerk, so I have 3 jobs. My colleagues only have 2. So inherent in the organization of these other communities, and granted our charter was much older, it was recognized that the manager cannot be doing 3 functions. 2 is what was granted.
Right, but our community is a lot smaller.
And we were at 2 until we had a 46% drop in income. So they had to double up in order for us to survive, and that's the reason why our police officers dropped in number as well. So the city was able to survive based on those things. I'm not sure I would agree with the fact that you need a personnel director right now.
Well, see, we've talked about this before where in the past, basically the duties of the clerk have been designated to the assistant city manager. And by charter, the manager is the clerk and the head of personnel. You're willing to delegate the personnel thing, but not the clerk thing. And I just think you can do it the way we had it, where you said you're looking for someone with credentials, clerk credentials. I think that frees up the clerk responsibilities, and you can still handle the HR one. That's how I see it.
However, by law, I still am required to obtain and maintain certification to administer an election because I hold the title of clerk. So even though I may not perform the functions, I'm still required to obtain the certification, go for all of the trainings. So that time will be, and right now I have conflicts with clerk training because clerk training happens to be the same day as HR training. So I've been going to HR training for the past several months to certify myself in human resources. So if I start...
I thought you had a certification in HR.
I did, and I'm renewing it. I had 2 separate ones. One is continuous, and the other one has to be renewed.
For how many classes?
Minimum of 6.
So I want to go back to the financial aspect of the assistant city manager. Randy, who's been doing all the reconciliations for before this?
The individual that has the role of accountant works on bank recs at the moment.
And so has the auditors ever found a problem with that?
Other than timeliness, No.
So they haven't identified a control problem with that needing?
They have not, no.
You've run
As
into
lo-
a problem just recently because of, you don't have a deputy finance director.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's doing the bank rec can't be handling cash. So, I mean, at one point, we were so short, I was actually having one of the clerks do the bank recs. But it was a clerk who did not cashier. I can't have the accounts payable clerk because they're cutting checks. I can't have the payroll clerk because they're cutting checks. I can't have any cashiers touch it because they're doing the deposits. So it's very restrictive on who's going to be able to do it. Joseph's point is the individual that does the bank recs now also has access to the general ledger.
But if you got a
Right now-
deputy finance director, that would alleviate that.
Yeah, I mean, right now, anything she does in the ledger has to be approved by me. It just doesn't, you know, I guess theoretically, she could be booking something and I miss it. So we have controls, they're not perfect, but we do have some controls now. He's just trying to make them stricter.
Would it be possible to revoke her access to make changes?
Yes, actually, we could remove the ability to post anything. She still needs to create some of the adjustments. There'd be the ability to remove the capability to post those
Especially
adjustments.
when we have a deputy finance director in place.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
at that time.
And the last day for that posting was today?
Correct.
Correct, yep.
I also, just a point I'd like to make, I think anyone who gets hired ultimately should do an interview with you before they're hired. I don't think any personnel should be hired without that step being taken.
Well,
In City Hall.
I think previously it was the department heads that interviewed, and in the police department, you also have a panel of police officers that interview, correct? And then just the final interview is done with the city manager?
In terms of promotions, I will be involved with the promotional process. I have not been involved with the hiring of the officers at the present time. But for promotions, I have been involved, or I will be.
But
I
when,
would have assumed
I
that.
thought when you've had interviews, didn't you have, what did you call it, an assessment?
The assessment center is done by an independent company.
We only had
Well,
that for Mr. Rohib, I believe, and then like IT.
And then for the DPW director, that was an assessment center. We're doing one for the assistant city manager as well.
And you didn't get involved with the final interview?
After the assessment center was created, then I was involved in terms of a follow-up interview, correct? But the assessment center is being conducted essentially by HR professionals.
So currently, when you're posting a position, what's the process?
Position is posted. City receives the applications. The eligible applicants are notified of the appropriate test.
Who
And-
does all that work?
Lori right now does all of that, and it's either a written test, computer test combined, or an oral board. If it's an oral board, we have to assemble the panel. For police and fire, Director Rohib has been assembling the panel for licensed police officers and firefighters. For civilian personnel, I've been involved in those interviews. For the IT record supervisor, for the dog warden, I will be involved with that.
So if you were to hire a personnel director, would they be doing all the things that Lori's currently doing?
They would be relieving her of some of the stress, not all, definitely not all. She's been busy, extremely busy, and actually I've apologized several times as to how much I feel that I've dumped on her because I haven't been able to do some of the work. So the idea would be to be able to relieve her of some of that responsibility so that she could help out also a little bit more on the purchasing side, because her job really is split between HR and purchasing. And I think we've been having a lot put on the purchasing agent. And I'll give you a case in point. When there is an election, there's no purchasing activities going on because there is no time for the purchasing agent to be involved in purchasing activities. So we really come to a stop in the city at certain times of the year. which is right after the November election. Mr. Altimus essentially has been working on purchasing from November through January, and he's finally starting to get relieving of that responsibility as those purchasing requirements have ceased, and he's able to start being a little bit more involved as an assistant manager. And then, of course, we've got the issue before closed session, so he's been pulled into that for his expertise as well.
So I don't see Lori's position, 50% of Lori's position, in the personnel department
It's been more, probably 75% personnel
currently. but
currently.
I'm looking at the line items, and I don't see it in the budget.
Her position is in the, trying to think, let me see if I can figure out where I put it. This. We have her, both her and Ms. Lentz charged 100% to the city manager's account. I do not have any time split with personnel or purchasing. Number one, because we haven't created a purchasing account yet. So both their times are charged directly to city manager.
So you spoke about training. If you have
Oh, excuse me, that's the other component. The personnel director is going to be responsible for the training. Arranging training for employees, in some cases conducting training themselves based on knowledge and experience, being a little bit more involved in the onboarding process of employees. Right now we have 3 people involved in onboarding new employees. We really need to only have 1 person involved so that we don't have things slip through the crack, and then also assimilate that person into the office so that the department heads and the staff don't have to spend as much time training. There can be some basic training done by an HR director introducing the employee to the various city systems. So yes, training is another key component, and I apologize for skipping that, but thank you for bringing that up.
about your training, though.
Okay.
That's under city manager.
Is it your position that if you had a personnel director that you would not do any of the HR training?
Well, right now I'm not finance director, but I try and go to normally 3 finance seminars, so I will probably go to a few. Will I need to keep a full certification? No, but for example, the employment law update, annual update, I'm definitely going to want to go to something like that, and some other ones that may be coming up that are changes in the law, because I need to be at least aware of that. I may not need to keep up my certification, but I will definitely need to keep up my knowledge, just like I do in government finance.
So under city manager, it's quite a jump for the budget, up to $9,000 for the annual basis. So who does that apply to? Just you?
No, let me see here.
Look 2 columns over, right? It's 8,900 to 9,050. Right?
I can't believe that we spent $9,000, I mean $8,900.
We haven't. We've only spent 3,000 for the year, right? And then
Oh, no wonder I'm looking in the
Is that
wrong
what you're-
place.
Under city manager?
Yes, I was looking in finance. I'm saying this isn't right. Okay, here.
3,000 so far this year. Oh, actually, how's your number different?
City council budget was set at 5,000 and we're up to 7, I think, right?
That's what I got sent to me. We probably got 2 different ones.
Yeah, we've only spent 2,000 or so.
Okay, you did not have a full-time city manager this current fiscal year, so salaries have increased.
Well, there's 2 of them. There was 2. So it's amended. But like you said, this probably was spent.
Yeah, this is the actual.
Automobile expenses up to 5,400?
Right, I get a car allowance, that's where it's charged. Let's see, go to the next page.
See right here, you see it?
Actually, the amended budget for 2018-2019 is $773,747. The city manager 172 budget is $584,000. Now, the changes will be in personnel, where we moved $120,000 from attorney into personnel. And in this document that you're seeing in front of you includes both personnel and manager. So the reason for that increase would be the transfer from the city attorney's account of $120,000 for the labor attorney. That's what we had in this year's budget, and that's what we're carrying over to next year's budget, except it appeared under attorney, not city manager. That's the difference.
So without all the transfers, what's the budget difference from last year?
Okay, let's take a look here. Well, we're down 260, and
Right here, maybe. This budget.
down 230. Actually, it's about a $10,000 increase.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
And that's by adding one additional employee.
There's a reason that we kind of like all these zero and went to
Oh wait, where's all the savings then?
Pension,
Oh, so we're just paying less, than like 90s.
I'm a little bit cheaper because I don't have insurance.
That used to be Joe.
There's also savings, for the fact there was a significant expense put forward for the searches for the various staff, so that's gone down.
Mrs. Wood, I do have one question, if you could just explain to me. The retirement contribution percentage under city manager, it's now 0.
We changed the account number in the general ledger to allow the HR system to properly spread costs. This was something that Mr. Blum did in order to assist in the preparation of the budget. He created a new GL number.
All right, so you're still contributing retirement contribution, it's just that it's in different areas right now.
Correct. But overall, the city did make a significant contribution. Remember, there was that advance payment,
Right, right.
so a portion of that was allocated this fiscal year.
So, I'm just saying, because, so actually, the budget is increasing that 147,000 also.
So we've got, what did I say, a net $10,000 increase? So essentially, whatever costs we incurred this year then would be carried over until next year with about a $10,000 increase, yes. That would be a fair statement.
Yeah, we should have 3 and not 6. Just more.
And granted, with, I'm going to call it the relief of the HR responsibilities, that will allow me to concentrate a little bit more time on the long-term planning that I know council wants me to do. It will give me a little bit more time to get out more into the community that I know council wants me to do. So there are things that I haven't been able to do because I've had all of these other little responsibilities or things that need to be taken care of. So sort of like with the police department. You have so many officers, but the demands are still there. But if you add more officers, well then, even though the demands are still there, the demands don't change, but they're spread out a little bit more evenly. So I look at it the same way. I still have these responsibilities, but having some additional assistance, skilled technical assistance in these areas will allow me to make sure that all of the work gets done well, not just as good as can be done for the time that you can dedicate to it.
I know we're in the city manager portion right now, but under the clerk department, there's funds for a department head.
Correct.
Who would that be?
That would be the assistant city manager. We spread those charges because it is the deputy clerk, so we spread those salaries to the city clerk's office and to elections as well.
So do you have a separate category for purchasing?
No. My plan was to have one, and there's an account under the new chart of accounts. That number is presently in use by another department, but since the state delayed the implementation of the chart of accounts, we weren't able to have that for the current budget, so therefore we do not have a separate department for purchasing. But when the new chart of accounts is implemented, there's going to be some renumbering, and one of the new numbers will, or freed up numbers, will allow for a separate purchasing function to be represented in this, in the general ledger and in the budget document.
So the position of clerk and elections with a salary in both of those only totals up to about 56,000.
The
Is that the salary you're gonna pay the assistant?
No, the balance is under the city manager's account, because the assistant manager is a manager, so there's time that's going to be spent as a manager and time that will be spent as a clerk.
So that's the department head
Correct,
under the line items.
correct.
I understand that, but in the city manager's office, I didn't see where the difference is. Is that the department head, another 28,000? So you have his salary listed as 28 times 3 times.
I believe I also have Mr. Marucci in there.
He's the
Supervisor,
supervisor,
non-union.
non-union.
Yes, okay, correct. 28.9 3 times would be the way it's spread, now that I see my spread. And Mr. Marucci is supervisor, non-union.
Well, council, my position is no on the personnel director. The assistant city manager is spread between elections and clerks, so they're going to be designated elections and clerk duties. And I understand that Mr. Spota has to get certified to be the city clerk. He can catch up on HR certification when and if he has time to. I don't see it necessary to add a full-time personnel director. And I do think Mr. DeMonico's idea that if we wanted to contract with a company to streamline some of those things, I'd be willing to look at finding funds for a contract, but I don't think this position's necessary.
I would like to, I agree with Mr. DeMonico about revising policies and so forth, but I think you can contract that. There's a lot of companies that will come in and review your employment policies and make sure that they're up to date and they report back.
And also, Ms. Lucida's suggestion, I'd be much more inclined to have a deputy city clerk than I would a personnel director, if I understood
Right.
your suggestion
Exactly.
correctly.
Well, I think that, yeah, because at this time, I just feel like, for a long time, this is how things have been done, and we haven't had an issue. We do have less employees now, and I don't think it's necessary to hire a personnel director at this time either. And Mr. Sabota's only been with us for about 6 months. I feel like even after a year, he might be able to evaluate a little bit better his needs once he gets more in place. There's been a lot of changes, and we have had a lot of, like, hiring we've done with, all at once with the different department heads, where some of that now is falling into place. We have a director of public safety, we have someone over at DPW. So we'll have the deputy finance director, hopefully. And also an assistant city manager. And hopefully they'll stick around for a while, so we won't have to worry about, him doing those, that taken away from his time.
I see at the bottom of page 6 of the 47 of the line items, it's under civil service, and there's a whole group of items there, and then there's also civil service in each of the departments. So I don't understand, like, in the police department, as an example, there's a line for civil service. So you said that the charges for hiring and firing and everything were gonna come out of the individual things, and yet it's category out of another separate department.
Right. We do have reservation for positions that we could potentially fill that we do not know which department they will be going into. Now, let's talk clerical staff, for example. Let's assume we need to hire some clerks. Well, I can't tell you right now what department those clerks are going into, but I can tell you that we're probably going to have an eligibility list. So where are the costs for an eligibility list going to be charged? Well, probably they should be charged to civil service, because under civil service rules, we're required to have an eligibility list. So you've got your advertising, you've got your testing fees, et cetera. So let's assume that someone actually does get hired off of that eligibility list, then those charges then through an accounting entry will then be charged to the appropriate department, and if necessary, we'd follow through with a budget amendment.
Okay.
And I think when looking at that, because I looked at that as well, I think the civil service, when it appears in the departments, it's a charge to that department, and then the civil service actual fund is the expenditure side of it. Does that make sense?
No, right now, if it's in the department, that is specifically allocated for anticipated expenses for that department. We believe if the budget is adopted, we will have to do a promotional exam. We will also have to hire a new firefighter. for the fire department. The police side, if the budget is adopted, we know that we will have to hire 7 new police officers plus replace those that are retiring. So those costs have already been anticipated and are included directly in the budget.
Okay.
The ones in civil service are those that we may need to do, but we don't know. But it's always better to be prepared. Because the last thing I need to do is have a time when we have someone resign, I need to post a position, and I can't because I have no budget authority to engage in this.
Okay.
Well, so I think we should probably vote on the personnel director, just make a couple motions as we go through this to change.
Well, I don't know, we
amended
have a lot of changes, I think, that we'd like to make, so I was thinking that maybe we could just write them down and then make them all together at the end, because you're gonna look at reducing some factor of the budget by the dollar sign, and then probably adding something else. So, I don't know how you feel, I was just.
If I could ask council, because this is something that could be easily done, if council is willing to entertain, let's leave a number, let's say, because I know how much needs to be done, $50,000 in for hiring a firm to do the policies and procedures, and then when we put out the bid, we'll know what that number comes in at. But at least I'd like to have a number in there, so I know where we could be at.
I was going to suggest something like that. We can at least look into it further at that point and, you know, like, review what they would do for us. And
So, Michael, I noticed you were writing down all kinds of things last night. You're the champion secretary here, so.
All right, we're good. I'll let him.
Well, I would suggest that if we go through, maybe we should vote individually, because there might be changes that we disagree on.
Okay.
get pretty complicated.
Right, so we could go through now individually and then go through yesterday's afterwards, what we discussed.
Yeah,
discussed
anything
yesterday,
anybody
The
was
presentations we had yesterday, okay.
Do you have were you thinking 50,000 for contract services?
That was kind of just a random number. I was thinking before he even threw that out. What would that reduce it by then? What was the total again? It
I'll
was,
get that number in a minute. It was found in my budget message.
Mr. Sabota, I got a question. I know you.
Excuse me. The personnel director was $116,426.
Okay.
I know you said that, right now you're outsourcing for like hiring department heads and stuff. So if we hired a firm, would we be saving the money that you have allocated, that you've been using for that right now?
Assessment centers,
Assessment centers.
that's something that we do not have the capabilities of performing in-house at all. It has to be done through an outside firm. No ifs,
I
ands,
guess
or...
we hire, HR director through an outside firm. Do you think that is something that they would provide also?
I know at least an organization that I belong to provides assessment center services. So yes, they could, but right now I'm satisfied with the assessment center services we're getting through our current provider. But they do not provide HR services. They only provide testing services.
Right, so if you're talking about HR and you're eliminating the one section, that would be something else that you would want to add into that?
Well, I was just wondering, because it might save us money if we were able to combine HR services and our assessment center services into one company, instead of using two separate companies for them.
That makes sense.
But the assessment services are actually experts in their own field. They're not necessarily, they could provide the assessment, but the individuals are, like if you're hiring a firefighter or a police officer, correct me if I'm wrong, you're hiring experts in, that you consider experts, expert
Okay.
police officers or fire. So the assessment center just goes and looks for those people and brings them in for the interviewing process.
And my guess is you're not going to get a contract that says, we will provide assessment center and HR services for one price. Assessment centers, because they are so rare, they're going to say, well, that's going to be an extra charge.
Who do we currently use now?
EMPCO out of Troy. They're the ones that assumed all of the old MML assessment center tests close to 20 years ago.
So, sorry.
I was just going to say we can at least just save $66K right now by just motioning to reduce
Yeah, so
personnel down to 50.
the way that this would then appear in the next budget would be a 50K in the line item budget.
Or professional services and personnel. And all costs related to personnel director, personnel costs, and that 116,426 the computer would wipe out.
I still think we need to have a discussion on what we want the passage of our budget to look like to prevent those funds from being just transferred and used for something else, if we're earmarking it for something specific.
There is a provision in the budget ordinance where council can earmark specific funds. You have that ability to earmark, say, this particular account, you're earmarking this amount for this amount, or this amount for this purpose.
There was a question of mine from the wording of because the ordinance is set up differently than usual, we're used to, right? So-
Right, this is set up according to the State of Michigan Department of Treasury's Uniform Budget Manual, recommended budget ordinance.
Yeah, adoption by
Was that in
function.
place last year?
Here,
No. Was that manual in place from
oh,
the
it's
state?
been in place for about 14, 15 years.
Then why didn't we follow it last year, and why weren't we dinged by the auditors?
We're not required to follow it, it's a recommendation.
What does Joe do?
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
He's been concentrating on parks a lot lately. He was working a lot with the city engineers, with all the construction projects that were going on. I have had him help on various interviews. He will be part of my panel for the formal interview process for the assistant city manager. I've turned over the cell phones over to him, the cell phone towers. Some of the smaller projects, if you will, special projects. I've had him look into various grant opportunities for the city. He'll be managing some of the grants that we have acquired or free services that we have been able to obtain.
Does
So,
he help you with the personnel though? Because you got Lori, then you got the assistant manager.
right, remember,
you
I'm
got-
looking for someone who has the certification. There's special certification in the HR field, and Mr. Marucci does not possess that.
Why can't he get it?
Yeah.
It's possible that he could get it. He'd have to go to school, and he'd have to pass several courses, and
Well,
then
he
it's
has an
continuing
MBA.
education. That is a possibility. I could ask him if he's interested. If he is interested and council wants to go that route, I have no objections there.
How long would that take? How long is that certification?
At least a year. At least.
Been a city manager and,
Oh, no, he has done some of the work.
yeah.
But once again, I'm looking to raise Eastpointe to a higher level. You know, there's the acceptable and then there's the best, and I want us to be the best.
That's why we sending him to school, so he can be the best.
And that, of course, would result in a reclassification of his job.
Well, it would take him a year to go to finish school, so at that time you could reclassify it.
Right.
And that might not be a bad suggestion, and then we could even you increase his wage a little bit more instead of going with the HR firm.
But essentially what you're looking at, and I'm just going to call a round number, if we say $50,000, I'm not saying we're going to pay Mr. Marucci an additional $50,000, but I think the number's still going to be $50,000 one way or the other, because salaries and additional training, et cetera, the total cost of that is probably going to come to $50,000. So you're either going to get it from an in-house person or you're going to get it from a private firm.
All right, what did we decide?
All right, if council has no objection, I can make a motion, and I wanted to add one thing to it, which is if we remove a personnel director, I think that the department in the line item's probably not necessary anymore, because then it's just legal, and I think that should just move back to legal.
Although I would argue that it's still a personnel cost, it's not a city attorney cost, and I think that those costs are going to be fluctuating over the years, especially when we're going into contract negotiations. So to truly represent the true expenditures of the city for personnel-related functions, I would suggest just leaving it there. It's better for accounting and account presentation. When we report our F-65s to the state of Michigan, they do have a function, a function listed for personnel services. Right now, we're reporting 0 because we don't have it. Properly, if we're a good F-65 report, we really should be spreading our costs.
All right, I guess it doesn't matter to me. It can be legal, it is legal services as well, it can go either way. So I'll make a motion to eliminate the proposed HR director and to earmark $50,000 for a possible HR services contract. And that's it.
Support.
Please call the roll.
Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Lucido,
Yes.
Owens,
Yes.
Pixley,
Yes.
DeMonico.
Yes.
And I think that's something that we could work with, and I'll talk to Mr. Marucci to see if he's willing. I've already have a commitment as to how long he plans on staying with the city, so it's not like he's going to be here today and gone tomorrow. He does have a little bit of a longer term that he indicated he would stay, so something like that would work.
So I'd like to talk to you about the city council budget.
Yes.
Salaries and wages are already preset, so there's nothing that you can do about those. But I'm wondering about the membership dues. What is that?
Okay, SEMCOG, $4,000, MML, $9,200, Eastpointe Chamber, $300, 8 Mile Boulevard Association, $2,400, Michigan Mayors Association, $85.
So why do those all come under city council?
Under the chart of accounts, we really are not to be reporting anything miscellaneous, and because council wishes to belong to those organizations, it's proper that those charges be charged to city council. If the city council did not wish to belong, we as a city would not belong to those
You
organizations.
would not belong to SEMCOG?
Correct.
You would not belong to SEMCOG
council
with the
did-
tips or the taps or anything related to highways or water and sewer or any of the other?
If council did not wish to belong as a city, we would not belong. However, we are still part of the region, so if we were not members, like we were not in another community, our projects were still included in the regional planning because we are part of the region. We just may not have been a member of the voting board.
So I have a question for Mr. Blum. The 8 Mile Boulevard Association, they were having a problem. Have they contacted you for dues payment?
They have not contacted me, and nobody in City Hall has contacted me.
I would like to drop the dues for the 8 Mile Boulevard unless we hear something different. Jordan was working on that. We've not heard. They were trying to
Jordan's not the director.
They were trying to reorganize, and
Yeah, I know they're not doing they didn't do the leadership.
I'm on that
luncheon
committee and I
this
haven't
year.
heard another word. So I don't think it would hurt for us to drop it. We can always amend it if necessary, but that's 2,400.
It's fine with me.
I'll make that motion to drop 8 Mile Boulevard temporarily at least,
Till further notice.
till further notice.
I think I'll vote against, but.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
I think you have.
you just get on the phone and just call Jordan and say, what the heck is going on? Because there's not
Jordan's in
been,
Ferndale now.
I know, but he's stepped up to try and reorganize it.
Is there a second?
I wanted to ask you a question because I think I kind of believe what you're saying, because even when I went to MML, I brought a council member there, and they wasn't a member of that MML, so it was kind of, they still allow him to come in, but
You pay a higher rate.
they pay a higher rate because they wasn't a member of, you know what I'm saying? So it was, I think the council does have to be a part of that, like Mr. Sabata was saying, before you can be, because they gave him a little bit, not of a hard time, but saying, is your city a member of this organization? He said no, and they wasn't a voting, part of the voting.
Don't we have to belong to MML for our insurance purposes?
No, that's MMRMA.
Well, we have MML for workers'
Workers'
comp,
We do.
so I think we're automatically a member because of that.
We are required, that is correct, in order to be a member of the MML Workers' Comp, because I had this issue in another community. We wanted to drop MML Workers' Comp and go with another, we wanted to drop MML membership, but we could not because we were in the MML Workers' Comp liability pool. So in order to be in the liability pool for Workers' Comp, you have to be in the MML.
Well, I'm fine staying a member of MML, so.
I am too.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was.
No.
Okay, Mayor, you do have a motion on the floor, but I have not heard a support yet. Who, was
There
that
was a
Councilmember
movement of
Owens?
support.
Sorry.
Was that Councilmember Owens who supported?
me.
Lucido.
Okay, sorry.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember, Mayor Pixley,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Owens,
No.
DeMonico.
No.
All right, under education and expenses, did we really use $7,000 in one year?
We haven't, however, council's given full opportunity to do so, and I strongly encourage council members to take full advantage. You shouldn't limit yourself because of a couple $1,000s in a multi-million-dollar budget. Education is very important. I encourage my staff to take it, I encourage employees to take it, and I encourage council to take it, and I would suggest just leaving that number. That's what was budgeted this year. We may not have used it, but who knows? There could be a turnover in council. Maybe the new council members will be using the options a little bit more.
Can we do something about approving education before someone takes it, have a,
Council can set their own internal policies as to how that money is spent. Yes, you can do that. Before a council member uses any funds, that they have to come to council for permission. That can be a council policy that the council can adopt and enforce. You police your own members.
all right, can we consider that maybe and adding that as an agenda item in the future?
Why we want to change that though?
Well, because I think that whatever class people are taking should have some value to the city.
To the city council.
But what classes have a council member have taken that you have an example of?
I don't know what classes went into this $7,000 that was expended, so I don't know.
We've only used like 20. Or
$26.99 through my report as of March 31st.
we're well under it.
And I don't know if that was before or after the MML conference expenses were booked.
It would have been before. It's currently at 3,800,
Okay.
or as of the date this secondary report was printed.
Because I thought we had set the budget at 5,000 previously, so I was wondering how it got up to that amount.
I believe last year it was.
Grand Rapids.
3061
But it was
was
determined
last
that
year.
it was basically, they calculated a dollar amount and then just multiplied by 5 and said each council person had this amount to go spend. And their intent was MML conferences, and there was something, you'd have to ask Randy Altimus that one.
I think there were only two MML conferences.
Yeah.
All right, whatever. All right, let's move on. Who
Well,
wants to discuss further?
in the budget document, the next page, if we want to stay in some sort of a order, would be the Finance Department. And that's Mr.
Wait.
Blum.
What about the clerk?
That comes after Finance in the budget book.
We're on city council. I think that's why we have court
You
next.
went back. to the-
You went backwards.
All right, so you're saying accounting department.
Accounting, that would be page 80. And let me preface this by saying, as a result of the settlement to the union grievance, there will be a slight change in the numbers in the budget, which have actually a positive impact in the general fund. So these numbers will change.
How so?
I haven't put the numbers in yet, but it depends on who gets moved into the payroll clerk position. And based on the settlement, we are essentially eliminating a general fund funded position in the finance department and replacing with a full-time funded position in the water fund. So there will be a slight change.
Does this meet with your approval?
Yeah. It was actually my idea to work out how we made it happen, that took care of the union issues. Finally, a light went off, and we took care of it. As far as the finance budget for the coming fiscal year, the changes are a reduction in the general fund of one full-time clerical position, as well as a part-time position being eliminated. That is the largest change. There is a reduction in the pension allocation to my department because I have one less employee, and it's kind of allocated based on where the employees are being charged within the budget.
Or the one employee, we're talking about water billing and sewer clerk, then one of, there used to be 3 and now there's 2, and the third one's in the water sewer fund?
That was the part-time accountant position that was eliminated.
Oh, okay.
If I'm not mistaken, all the water billing clerks go to water sewer, right?
There are 3 clerks that are charged, well, actually 3 clerks and 1 cashier that are charged directly to water sewer. There's the accounts payable and payroll clerk, and currently another clerk that is charged to general fund. It is the other clerk that is being eliminated. That job's basically going to be combined with the payroll clerk position. As far as job duties, that's actually where it should have belonged all along, which is how we're able to eliminate the position out of general fund. And then the part-timer was just a high school intern that I had. His employment ended, and we have decided not to replace that particular position.
So I guess maybe I'll rephrase my question. I guess, did we go from, at least I have a note here, we had 3 water billing and sewer clerks, and now we have 2. I guess I don't care where it goes in
Oh, on the chart,
budget,
or this org chart?
9 or 82.
I think the wrong box got deleted.
Oh, okay.
There should still be 3 water clerks.
Okay.
Well, one of them's labeled as tax and miscellaneous billing clerk. Or we have-
That's
Right, and
position.
that's the one that's going to be combined with the payroll clerk duties.
Okay,
So that actually, the tax miscellaneous billable is actually a water bill clerk.
I don't have any more questions.
Anybody else? Anything else in finance?
The next portion is assessing. That again, because it's contractual, there's not much to it. We did the new agreement with the assessing company, and they have a fixed 2% increase instead of doing the rate of inflation like we had been. So rather than have it vary, 1.5 one year and 2.6 the next, it's going to be a straight 2% increase over the life of the agreement. And that's what's reflected within the assessing budget. So there's not much to that either. And then there is a new department called treasurer. The only item in there is $10,000 for investment fees. That is a charge that previously had been in the 101-299. The city, some people call it city hall, some people call it citywide, but it's kind of a miscellaneous city department. So it was moved out of there and into this separate department.
This is another one of those departments on the F-65, and it's going to be even more strictly enforced with the new chart of accounts that we should be reporting treasurer function costs in the treasurer department. So most likely, next fiscal year with the new chart of accounts, that number is going to increase while the finance department line is going to be decreasing, or the accounting function, because the state wants us to properly and accurately report treasurer costs, since those are state law mandated positions.
So when you say F-65 in English?
Oh,
that's,
I'm sorry. The F-65 is the detailed report that the city is required to submit to the Treasury Department as of December 31st each year, and that is the report that the Treasury Department uses, as well as Munetrics, to help compare costs of municipalities across the entire state of Michigan. So by being more accurate with reporting on F-65s, the comparisons will be more accurate for those of us who use that information. You can actually pull down the F-65 report from the website if you're really a policy geek.
How did you come up to a value of $10,000 for that position?
That is the investment fees that we pay Robinson Capital, who handles our investments. Theirs is a percentage of our holdings, and we just get a monthly bill. It runs, it's been a little bit under 10,000, but as the investments grow, so will the cost.
Okay. And I'm a little bit confused. The next item on the line item is the audio visual in Department 261.
Yes, that was separation from city manager's office. That covers the costs of the employees who tape and broadcast all of the public meetings, as well as, in a future year, I will be recommending, assuming it gets through capital, is an upgrade of all the AV equipment here in the council chambers. So I'm already preparing to make that recommendation.
So who's going to supervise over this audiovisual?
That will be determined based on who becomes the new assistant city manager. Right now, Mr. Altimus is responsible for supervising this function. A lot of Mr. Altimus's responsibilities, the division of those will be determined as to who's hired
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
and what their skill set and knowledge base is.
Which numbers, oh wait, 261 here? I found it.
261.
Okay.
Page 6.
We talk about IT
We
right
ready
now,
to
then?
go into the clerks and elections?
Actually, the next page is city attorney, page 89 in the budget document.
We're doing both here, I guess.
Yeah.
Line item and here, except,
Well,
so
you have to.
audiovisual's not in here,
You
right?
have to
Yeah.
because there's no breakdown.
Yeah, a little confusing. We probably
Very
should have pages in the,
Well, when I was preparing the budget, with the budget document, actually to save Ms. Lentz from having to manually renumber all these pages, department heads were instructed, you keep the exact same number of pages so we don't have to do anything because we were in such a time crunch. The idea was we would have had more time if the chart of accounts would have been able to have been implemented so that we could have killed two birds with one stone. But since we couldn't, we kept the same format so it's easier for council and the public to follow from year to year. The line items, that's a general ledger. We don't have the ability, well, I'll have to look to see if we have the ability to change how that's actually presented in terms of the reports. We may have some ability there. I don't know. But that's also mandated by the state of Michigan, so sort of have to follow that process in our financial reporting.
All right, so we're on to city attorney.
City attorney's on page 89, yes, and I can tell you what the differences are. The labor attorney costs from $120,000 were put into personnel. The city attorney costs in regards to filing or representing the city at the tax tribunal are now represented under the city assessor. The city attorney costs for representing the city for code enforcement nuisance violations are now represented under blight enforcement, and the city attorney costs for representing the city in regards to the dangerous building process are now represented under that particular function that we discussed yesterday. So the only thing that you will find in the attorney's line item account would be the retainers, and also we have a significant sum set aside for the DOJ defense. And if there's, we also added a little bit extra just in case Mr. Albright performs some services that doesn't fit into any of the other categories that we have already identified from prior bills.
I'm a little concerned with splitting this up so much. When Mr. Altimus submits a bill, now does the finance department have to go through that and charge it to different?
Actually, he does a very good job with his bill identifying what the services are. Those are separated, so it's just a different account number.
Okay.
Yeah, how we do it, and it's explained under the city attorney section, how our contract for legal services is separated is, we have a general retainer for $97,000, and that includes appearances at city council meetings, appearances with department heads, all of the prosecutions, including any jury trials over at the 38th District Court, telephone conferences, all of that is included, and also ordinance drafting, and it's all set forth in our contract for legal services, but that is set forth under the $97,000 per year retainer. We also have a separate section which is billed for services not covered under the general retainer at $100 per hour. Those include contract review. If the city is sued by a plaintiff for something that is not covered by the MMRMA, then we represent the city in that matter, and that is covered at an hourly rate of $100. That would fall under that category. What every attorney in our firm is required to do is we prepare a timesheet every single day. So if I do any city business, it's either going under, we call it EP Gen, which stands for just the Eastpointe General, and that would go under the $97,000 retainer. Also, Eastpointe prosecutions, so If I'm over, for instance, I was over at the 38th District Court today for approximately 3.5 hours. If you looked at my timesheet, it would see EP Pros, meaning Eastpointe Prosecution, 3.5 hours. And how our city manager, our office manager then inputs that in, she will then divide that up and put that into the different categories. So that's how we keep track of everything on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And then the council also gets our monthly status report. That includes all of the various cases, whether it's dangerous building cases, contract review, sending out subpoenas, all of that is then detailed with we try to keep it brief, a brief explanation in that monthly status report that goes out.
And then their actual invoice is grouped. So there's a dangerous building section, a nuisance abatement section. They basically break it down for us on the overall invoice.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't
Yeah.
any extra work that was gonna go in with,
Maybe another 30 seconds a month.
okay.
So occasionally, we've used civil service in the past, not a labor attorney and not the city attorney, but a civil service attorney, and I don't see a line item for that.
We could add a couple $1,000s, that's not a problem. It may have just been a slight oversight.
So under civil service, it's 269, it's a separate department, but you're integrating it into all the other departments?
Right, but for civil service, if they actually incur a cost for an attorney, that would be charged to the civil service. I don't have a problem adding a couple thousand. Like I said, there will be some adjustments here and there that need to be made just because assumptions made in March are going to change in May and June because of facts that have emerged, or we may have missed 1,000 here or 1,000 there. And I'll make a note to make sure that we do add some attorney to civil service.
All right, now, are we ready to go to clerk?
Yes, we are. And clerk is just not clerk anymore. It's been split between clerk and elections. This is another one of those functions under the F-65 and the new chart that the state would really like to see separated. So Mr. Altimus was kind enough to go through the entire budget of the clerk's office and separate those two. And we're budgeting for 2 elections, November and the presidential primary. We also have an offset in terms of revenue to help reimburse us for those presidential expenses. There are no changes. However, this will be a very interesting budget year because with the new changes in state law, we don't know how that's going to affect operations either internally, meaning by the number of potentially increased absentee voters, and externally, meaning by the number of people who will actually be going to the polls. So this will be an exercise in practice over the next 3 elections to see, are we going to be needing more precinct workers, less precinct workers? Will we need more help here in City Hall or less help, more overtime, less overtime? We don't know yet, but at least we know what we're going to need to order in terms of supplies.
So currently in the clerk's office, you have 1 election person and 1 clerk.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
So today, one of them was ill, and when the other one went to lunch, the department was completely closed.
Correct.
Is that going to happen all the time?
The goal is to have, based on our job descriptions, to have the ability for our clerks to share if necessary, split, cover. We have had situations in the past where this has occurred, and generally it's just, well, could you watch the counter for a few minutes? So it has happened, it will happen.
Yesterday, the whole place was, the steel door was down for the whole day because they were at training.
And anyone who worked in the clerk's office would have been at training, so the office would have been closed.
So it was closed and the steel door was down, and then it was closed again today with the steel door down. So all the people that came to get dog licenses or anything else, they automatically went to the building department, which had a line already. So then they go to finance. Now they're upset because the finance people say, well, we can't help you because we don't know that job. So
Right, and I can tell you that this is the first community that I've worked in where we as managers do not, or non-union people, employees have the right to actually perform the work at the counter in the event of a circumstance such as that. The union contract does not offer flexibility. If you remember, that was one of the grievances. This is the first time in my entire career where I've actually had that, so that will be a subject of collective bargaining, where in the event where we have a situation where the clerk's office is down because employees are out, the city manager's office or the actual city clerk and the deputy city clerk should actually be able to perform clerk duties in the clerk's office. Right now, we don't have that ability.
They filed a grievance against Mary yesterday, or sometime this week, because she stepped in when the line was real long in front of the building department to help somebody out, and so that was a grievance.
I mean, this seems like way too minor of a point to get to a collective bargaining issue.
I think it's
if
major.
the whole.
But
No, I mean, like, it's a major issue that the clerk's office is closed, but that someone can't just hold on for an hour, keep the clerk's office open for an hour. That doesn't.
Right, I'm wondering whether you
I've never
couldn't
heard
have
of
a
this.
float clerk.
Yeah.
A part-time clerk, like who Monica has worked in every single office throughout this whole city during her time. So I'm wondering if you couldn't have someone like that to be able to float whenever there was, today the problem was Kimmy was sick and she was at home. But you only have one person, so when that person leaves, now you have an empty office.
All right, and that's under the rules that we have. We have staff in the building right now that could do the work,
But previously, we had a part-time clerk in there, which covered the problem.
correct, but does the city want to pay $27,000 a year to have an employee here to cover circumstances that occur on a rare basis?
Well, she also did helped out with the election and everything else in that clerk's office. I would rather spend a little bit of money to keep somebody at those places than to have angry residents calling and screaming because we're not providing the service.
That is a decision for council. There is a cost, there is a financial cost to that, and I know that one of my charges was to develop a structurally balanced budget.
So how much did you reduce our budget from when you reduced that clerk?
That was
Because that clerk was in the previous budget.
right, I'll give you that dollar figure in a second.
And how have we not? I haven't heard of this until now. I didn't know we were closing
That's
departments.
because you're busy working all the time and you don't pop in here.
Yeah, I came in here
But, you know,
yesterday.
yesterday,
Right.
every day this week, there have been
right.
4 or 5 people at the
Yeah.
building line, and there's a lot of people coming in for the clerk's office because of dog license and stuff. So
Right. Yeah.
I do think that, I mean, ultimately, the assistant city manager, the city manager should be able to fill that position. But I understand that it's not in their contract to do that. But I mean, that would be the answer to the problem, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
you're looking at about $26,000 round number for a part-timer.
So we had that position in the clerk's budget last year, right?
That's
Last
cor-
year, we had the part-time.
Right, this year I have part-time to cover assistance during elections. So it is anticipated that we will need additional staff during elections, and that position is reflected during elections.
So when you say elections, just during election day or preceding the election?
Preceding and after for cleanup.
Preceding means how long?
I think I've got a total of 4 or 5 months in this budget.
So we have an election in November.
October, November, December, January, February, 5 months.
So we should be having a part-time person in that department pretty quick, right? Like next month
No, October,
for the November election?
correct.
He's saying 5 months total for both elections.
For over the course of a fiscal year, correct.
Okay.
So that 27,000 is on top of what you already have allocated for that position.
Right now, I have allocated, and I don't have a program that I can use to give you an exact dollar. I can only tell you salaries. I have, it's 262, 750. I have $11,115 allocated for salaries for a
So the
part-time clerk.
difference- The difference right now would be 16,000 if we.
About $16,000, correct.
$16,000 more if we just wanted to keep that part-time clerk there the whole time. all
Correct.
year.
However, I will tell you that if there's not an election, that clerk really doesn't have that much to do during significant portions of the year in that office. So having a clerk dedicated in that office just to have a third person there is not an efficient use of taxpayer dollars. That person
which
would
is-
properly, if we keep a person to be a floater, that person would have to float.
That's what I was gonna say, but can we replace that person to be a floater?
which goes back to my original premise, is because people call in sick and you only got 2 persons there, and in your building department, you had a couple desks that were empty, and so the burden falls back on finance. And those clerks are really getting hit by a number of people that are dissatisfied with the service. The other thing is, you're running into a lot of problems because people are saying, I pay all my taxes and there's nobody here, where are they? So that's the reputation of the city as well.
No, and I truly understand that. I wish we had more flexible rules, but if council wishes to have a part-time, full-year clerk, that's council's decision.
I would prefer that be a floater position, so if they're short somewhere, they can fill in, a part-time floater position.
I think Monica, as an example, Monica and Marcinsic, is that her name?
Martin?
Right, because I know she was working in the library, she's worked in finance, she's worked in water, she's worked in building, and she worked for a long time in the clerk's office. So she is an example of somebody that's been a part-time, I think she's a full-time clerk, right?
Full-time now.
I agree with that. We're closed on Fridays. We should do what we can to have each
Yeah.
thing open during the 4 days. Yeah.
Yeah, like the mayor was saying, I came in that morning and I thought it was a Friday, because I'm like, why are we closed?
And we did have quite a few people out sick, and we had them out for, required being out for training purposes. Like I said, the clerks, whoever was in the clerk's office would have been gone
What I'm
that day.
surprised in is that happened 2 days in a row, and I know you're so big on succession plans, and you don't have one for that.
Well, also, you had a problem last week, I believe, when you were sending out all the sidewalk notifications, and it ended up that 5 clerks had to come in and spend Friday, which made it time and a half.
Right, and that's going to be a once-in-a-year exercise. If most likely that's how it's going to be, a once-in-a-year exercise. That way they're able to concentrate on their normal duties during the normal day. I think we actually did better getting the notices out in the manner that we did this year than we did in prior years.
But it was time and a half for 5 clerks, and we had not anticipated coming in on Friday.
There was room in the budget for that, in the building department. We had room in the budget.
I don't think that's
Missed
the
the
point she's
point.
trying to make.
All right, so do we need to make a motion then to,
I don't have any objections. I think I have the sense of council on that.
Okay.
And this solves the problem, we'll be able to not close any windows then?
In theory, it should. I can't promise, because you never know how things go, how many people will be. I remember that one day, what did we have, 2 people in finance, and Mr. Blum was on vacation, and I was ready to pull someone from another building to come in, if necessary.
I mean, if it's some insane scenario that happens once a year, that's a different thing than twice in 1 week, yeah. But, yeah, okay.
and I think those were legitimate reasons for the absence as well.
No, I'm not objecting to the reasons for the absence.
Right.
Bad timing.
All right, so a part-time floater clerk.
Okay. Or float, yeah.
Floating secretary. Okay, so we are on City Hall.
Next page would be, whoops, I lost myself, I was on 80. 93.
95.
Insurance Department, 94.
Yes.
That's Mr. Blum.
Yes, the insurance department is where we charge non-public safety retiree health care, and then non-public safety workers' comp and general liability cost are charged to this department. The retiree health care contribution is actually going down. The required contribution is dropping. And so you see a drop from 873,000 down to 760,000 in this area. And then the workers' comp and general liability have been kept flat year over year.
Does that continue funding, like, because our percent funded is very low? Those go up?
The percent funded hasn't really changed, but just the way the actuary came out, the required contribution is dropping. They actually have us required to contribute less than our actual cost, which I always find odd. So we're budgeting actual premiums, not even, or we're contributing more than the ARC requires, even with this lower number.
Okay.
So it's kind of an
That's kind of
oddity.
good news.
Oh, yeah, it's very good news.
Well, is it because we have less employees now, and that's why the, like,
We're starting to see some of the impact of the changes we've made in retiree health care. We're expecting a large change with the next actuary, but it's just all these changes we've made over time are having a positive impact.
okay.
That's good news.
Yep.
And I will say this, most likely when the new chart of accounts is implemented, this department will most likely be eliminated, and workers' comp costs will have to be spread to the various departments. General liability will probably have to be spread to the various departments in some sort of a formula, and likewise with the retiree health care costs, we'll have to figure out which departments to charge those to. We'll either have to do that through an internal service fund allocation or a direct allocation that will be determined when the new chart comes out. But I see this department actually disappearing under the new chart of accounts, under the, once again, the wants of the Treasury Department to have all departments accurately reflect the actual cost of providing the service, either in the past or in the present. Page 95 is your City Hall unallocated. As I mentioned yesterday, this will be renumbered to 265. It will only be City Hall improvement costs. In the past, this has been a catch-all which included investment fees and IT. IT costs were separated and put into a separate GL, or separate department in the general ledger. However, for purposes of representing total costs in the budget document, both IT and City Hall costs are represented together. And the reason for the increase is in the prior fiscal year, the city really didn't spend much of anything for IT, and now we have a contract with an IT vendor, and as a result, those costs are a little bit higher.
I have one question about City Hall, and that was, for the lease payments. You have $18,000. What was the lease payments for?
299 lease payments.
Those are the City Hall copier leases.
Okay, all right.
Most likely, once again, under the new chart, those will probably be spread to the departments where they're located, but we're leaving them where they are now.
Okay.
So for IT, I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday too. The new computers, we do something pretty interesting at the Court of Appeals where, and this is something that I think our IT folks could definitely research and give you their thoughts on. Everyone doesn't have per se a computer as you'd think. Everyone doesn't have a tower. They have these little boxes we call thin clients. It's just this tiny little box that's not its own computer, connects to a server where essentially everyone's desktop is. This will be very confusing if you don't understand IT at all. But it's meant to, you can manage easier, so our IT folks will be able to manage everyone's stuff easier, and then it's cheaper for each person because you're not buying an entire computer for every separate person. You just buy a couple powerful servers, and it handles it. I think they should look into that.
This is similar to the old dummy terminal from 40 years ago where you had one central mega computer and you had your workstations where you just had a monitor and a keyboard. I think they're sort of going back to that.
Kind of, yeah. It's just because, yeah, a server these days can handle so much stuff. Everyone's desktop just runs. No one complains at the Court of Appeals about it being real slow or anything like that. I think all kinds of places use it now. It's a lot cheaper and more nimble for the IT folks, so I think we should look into that.
We do have the IT vendor charged with that responsibility, so I'm confident that they'll be looking at all options.
Yeah, I have no idea what the cost for new computers would be. How'd we come up with the 200? Just curious.
$150,000 is what was in the CIP, and then we have identified we need another server, And based on historical costs, that's about 50 grand. So that's where we came up with the 200.
Where are all these computers going?
Every single department in the city.
Is getting all brand-new computers?
All brand-new computers. All of our computers essentially will be non-supported as of January, with few, and I mean relatively few, exceptions. And actually, 2 of our servers, I think, will be non-supported as well.
Yeah, a whole bunch of Windows operating systems will be unsupported, but yeah.
I think that's a really good idea. I've worked in offices that use that.
Oh,
And
okay.
you can go to any computer and log into your own desktop.
Yeah, that too.
basically.
Yeah.
So,
And we do have that capability here actually in City Hall. We can go to any desktop and log in, and essentially our settings will pop up, especially for emails
Well-
and our drives.
But the difference is that computer has to be on. There's no such thing anymore because all the computers are on the server, essentially. So if you're accessing your computer from home right now, your PC has to be on here.
Correct.
Since it's on a server, the server's always on. You don't even have to worry about that. And then what is the new server for, though, that we're talking about? What? Because I know we've talked
Was
about
that the
trying to.
BSNA server? Or the,
And I guess
we have 2 servers that are dying.
Yeah, that's all I know. I couldn't tell you which one specifically, but there are 2 that are failing on a regular basis.
I just like the IT folks then to look in to see if we can go to cloud on stuff, because I mean almost everything's in the cloud. Then you have less to manage in-house, and it should be cheaper, and then you don't have to worry about ever upgrading servers either, because your cloud provider does all that. I don't know, BSNA, I don't know how all their stuff works. You might not be able to do that, but
BSNA
the
comes
IT
with the
people.
cloud, doesn't it?
No, it's on a server-based.
Right. And that's one of the security things too, is that you can't hack the server because there's no outside access.
I don't agree with that from an IT position, but cloud is probably typically more secure than even a server in City Hall now. But I think we should just have the IT people.
They have 30 days.
All right, I look forward to the report.
What are you gonna do with all the old computers?
We will definitely destroy the hard drives at a minimum. And I believe IT will have a recommendation as to what to do with the remains.
Now, is a certain amount of time that we have to keep computers or get rid of them that you guys know of, just like we do the cars?
Yeah, 4 years generally, similar. It's really more geared on the operating system than the hardware itself. Yes, the systems are getting more powerful and faster, but as long as the software that you have is able to be supported by the hardware, as long as the hardware is not dying, you don't really have to worry about a turnover. But once the operating systems and the software cannot work on the hardware that you have, you need new computers.
Is that what the library has, that with the cooperatives?
Exactly. That's what the
So
library,
we have
sort of like
that.
the enterprise, where they've got, every 3 years, the library gets new computers. It's like the enterprise, rent-a-car, every 3 years not the rent-a-car, but the fleet program, every 3 years or 4 years with the cars, you replace the police cars.
So I think they save a lot of money doing that. Will we benefit from doing the same thing, or?
I'm not aware of any computer cooperatives.
You just said the library has it.
Yes, but that's for the library. It's the
Okay.
library network, and
Okay. Can you look into it?
IT can look into computer cooperatives, yes.
Next.
Page 97 is the police department. I don't know if you want to discuss that now, since we're sort of there and director's here.
I'm fine discussing it now.
yeah.
I think we should.
Yeah.
I think we have quite a few.
Where Director Ruheb has been working since 7 o'clock this morning. You were
Yeah,
But
wake 'em up
if
over-
I look tired, I am tired.
Madam Mayor, if you don't mind if I start for a minute?
no, please, go ahead.
After reviewing everything that has been presented to us, I do think that the one thing that, I know this is actually a drug forfeiture and not out of the police department, but I want to talk about the patrol vehicles. And I do believe that it would be the best interest of the city to go ahead with doing the financing through enterprise for the patrol vehicles
And the gas.
and the gas, yes.
Yes, for everybody.
So, did we tabled the enterprise leasing,
Until I think we wanted to discuss it at budget.
okay.
Actually,
It's
it's
all proposed,
hearing on the agenda per council order
right,
Wednesday.
but, so they know ahead of time if they need to change it in the budget, we need to discuss it tonight,
Okay.
so.
Does everybody agree with that?
And so you'd like to just, at least,
For
at
the
this
police
point in time,
department, right now.
What about the unmarked
patrol.
vehicles?
yeah.
I'm fine with going ahead with all of police department's inventory, because I think that would be the easiest way to go forward, is to move the whole police department over to leasing.
And then, along with that, once we start initiated a leasing agreement, then we can also go ahead with gas for all
All the departments.
the departments.
So what are we gonna do with the tank that needs to be fixed and
Has to be
stuff?
removed.
Okay. You
That's,
didn't put that in the budget?
that will be in the budget. That's another one of those items that came up after March 28th. So we've got some numbers, maybe in my pocket right here.
But your undercover cars wouldn't come under that, would it? Mr. Ruud,
You talking about the detective vehicles?
undercover cars wouldn't
Yes, that would fall under the same plan.
under the lease agreement also?
Yes, yes, Mayor.
With the exception of the motorcycles, I should say. I don't think we need to lease
No,
those.
those are,
Yeah.
I've been trying to get a ride on that
barely have
motorcycle.
any miles on them.
It's not too late.
So I like that. I definitely wouldn't want to do the lease program. I think personally with any of the others, didn't seem to quite make.
For the rest of the departments
Enough
right now,
sense.
I'm not,
I think we should try it for a year and see what happens.
I think the police department is a good spot to start the trial.
test it, yeah.
Yes, because it's the most necessary, so.
Yeah. How many vehicles was that again, just for PD then?
So you would put that on the agenda for the 8th, correct?
It's already on the agenda.
Okay.
I don't have the number with me. I want to say it's around $20,000-$30,000 for tank removal. And pray we don't have contaminated soil.
I was about to ask that for the cleanup.
We have insurance. Oops. We have environmental insurance if there is any contaminants. And it's retroactive to 1995, so if there's a leak, it'll be covered within that time frame. So, yeah, but the quicker we get out of the ground, the better.
Well, I know you still have gas in there, right, that we can use?
It will be
As the
used.
program starts, we'll use it up.
Okay. Need some help, let me know.
So, yeah, would it be just, I'm just curious right now, just to have a better idea, the, those spreadsheets they gave us, so it'd be for the cars, sorry, back to the lease program,
As far as I know, it'd be the ones on,
15, 17, 20.
which we're gonna get probably a detailed inventory when we.
Yes, it's on
approve
the-
it next week,
It's
but,
on the agenda, so I've got a little work to do to revise the packet that's presented before council.
Okay,
I'll get Mr. Conway involved, because I'm sure that the numbers have changed now since we're looking at 2020 model year rather than 2019.
and we are changing off the chargers, it looks like, and,
yeah, because we're not gonna change them all over right away. You have a succession plan for that.
Just a portion.
Yes, so a little bit could be every year.
The priority is to get rid of the Chargers. They're just too much money in maintenance.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Did you have the contracts on with the agenda next?
Correct.
Can you, well, I guess they'll come.
They're on the agenda packet. They've been continuously, so.
And then if you wanna maybe start with, staffing
Personnel.
levels.
Right.
Should we discuss the chaplain first?
I don't think it's an appropriate position to pay.
No, I don't
So-
I don't think it's an appropriate position to pay either.
I think it's an appropriate position to pay, but since we have 3, I don't think we should pay if we have. But I think that's a very strong job that people should get paid for. So I
mean,
won't say that, but
I
since we
agree. I
got
think it's
other
very
volunteers,
important.
you know.
job. I do think it's a very important job, but we have a lot of volunteers in the city that are
Yeah.
volunteers.
That's
Well,
what I'm
I think
saying.
we're only using three trained chaplains currently, right?
Yes.
But
You know,
my-
another option too is eliminate the whole pay thing and create a separate line item for chaplains for their uniforms. Maybe they have to attend certain schools or a conference, or even if they have to go back and forth and they're putting miles on their personal vehicle, we can reimburse them for that. That would be a fair compromise.
And
I
there,
would be okay for, especially for training, to pay for training for our police chaplains.
Why have we charged, or have they paid for it?
they've paid for it on their own.
Yeah, they do a lot of things on their own. They're using their personal vehicles to attend meetings, you know, to meet employees for
Counseling?
counseling purposes and,
So I know James goes to, like Washtenaw County and other places
Yes.
like that. So that would be his cost if he goes outside of the city, but to go to a meeting, a local meeting or something representing the city of Eastpointe, I would be in favor of that.
Or even if he's going for one of our officers directly to like the hospital, like you had
Sure.
mentioned yesterday.
Sure.
I wouldn't mind reimbursing him, gas mileage for that either.
Yeah.
like if he goes to the Michigan Associations of Chiefs of Police Conference, he has to pay for his own room, his meals, just something like that, just not asking for a lot.
The mayor had to pay for hers too. I only got to go to one.
The mayor could have submitted the bill to the city, because
No.
there's money left.
Oh my God. Listen, education and conferences at that time were completely out of it.
So maybe,
But I would like you also, in the meantime, to check with other departments, because there are other cities that have, I believe Oak Park now has a chaplain. I know St. Clair Shores has one. And see if
He
they,
represents about 4 departments in Macomb.
James does,
Yes.
yeah.
Would
He
it be,
represent, does he still represent New Baltimore also?
I believe so, yes.
It was New
St.
Baltimore
Clair
and St. Clair
Shores.
Shores and, yeah.
would it, council, be okay with director figuring out what that number is, and we'll remove the concept of compensation, and just leave a number in the budget to cover the costs that,
Various costs.
various costs? It's a minor number.
because, I
Yeah,
mean, we
would
do
it-
have 3, so I mean, for me, it's not just, I mean, it would be open for training for all of them, if they wanted to go to training
Well,
for a
that-
police chaplain.
I think they've all completed their chaplain training.
Yes.
I think the newest one hasn't completed the second level yet, the advanced.
You know, honestly, I think the figure would be anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000.
Yeah, that's
I mean, yeah. how
fine by
much-
me.
That's fine.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, how much training do we have for the whole PD? I mean, it seems like it'd be just could fit right in there already, probably, wouldn't even.
How many chaplains?
I guess
does
it
a-
doesn't matter to me. Sorry,
Sorry.
okay, so go ahead,
I
sorry,
bet you
Monique,
was
sorry.
going down the topic. How many chaplains does a city really need? If we got 3 and we send it, you know what I'm saying? Like, what, I mean, I agree with the mileage, but the uniforms and the training,
Well, the 2 just came on board, and one of them is going to be focusing on the fire department. You know, with James right now, honestly, he's all over the place. He's all over the county, and there's a lot of times where we need him when, unfortunately, he's at, you know, a conference or at another department, you know, counseling, and, you know, plus he works, you know, full-time. So it's difficult for one. If that's I think it's a great program, and if the 2 they're coming aboard, they're volunteering, that's great.
I think Kevin Lancaster has been classified as a chaplain for quite some time.
Yes.
It was just that he didn't have as much involvement
Yes.
because of his church, but I think now is
Yes,
the time.
and he just wants to be more, you know, part of the departments, and
Right.
I appreciate that.
And the other one, the newest one, I think that he teaches CPR and so
Yes.
forth, so.
So we're essentially clearing that, oh wait, no, that's,
Number will be adjusted would be a proper description. Number and categorization will be adjusted. We'll probably create a new account number, chaplain expenses.
okay.
All right,
How about the projected costs, the capital improvements in the building?
capital improvements? I had no objections to any of the capital improvements.
Neither did I.
Anyone? All right.
Think it.
I think part of the capital improvement was, I think, the gym. I think in the contract, don't we have something in the contract where we give them some type of fund or, incentive to, a health incentive or something?
We have the healthy living incentive, which I think is to all of our employees, and that's like if you're not a smoker, it's like through the health insurance.
And actually, the patrol union does not have the healthy living incentive. The command officers do.
Okay.
Patrol union would not accept it.
So actually, what is the because actually, it looks like we have everything for the next fiscal year in the CIP in the.
That's my fault for not doing a complete edit. When Mr. Altimus was preparing the document, what he did was he changed the title at the top, but forgot to cut and paste and move some of the accounts over a year. So the numbers are correct. They're just in the wrong year in the graph, but they're in the correct year in the budget document.
Oh, for
So big picture, the numbers are correct. Detail, thick document, incorrect. General ledger, correct. So it was a cut and paste error.
okay, so page 177, we should move over. Well, except I don't see any.
Gym equipment is not in there, and I'm looking into my detail. So when I hear council saying they have no objections to the capital, I know Director requested gym equipment, and that was as a result of a study that just occurred within the last couple of weeks, so that's new information presented to council. We will include that in the final document.
And the generator is still for next year, correct?
We do have the generator in here, I
Or do
believe.
we for this year?
For next year.
Let me see here.
It's
That was
been on there for a
21 too, I
while.
don't remember.
I think it's for next year.
Next year is the generator.
Why don't we? Okay, so why don't we look at this real quick in each item? Because we
So-
got 555 altogether, right, for 2021. That's printed on page 177 right now.
Right, but the
do
lighting
we-
and the generator are gonna be next year, that's not for this year.
Okay, so just the 4 above that should be moved
Right,
over.
the, interior and exterior improvements, lockup improvements,
Backup
emergency
improvements are
lighting,
in.
And that's subtracting $19,000 for the grant we received.
range, maintenance, and ventilation system. And then we would have to add the workout equipment.
Right, the workout equipment will be added.
And how much was the workout equipment again? Was like 18,000?
Anywhere between 15 and 18, depending on the equipment. And you know what, we don't have to get it all next year. We can piecemeal it.
I would like for them to piece it, because I wanna save some of that money for, we got all this overtime we're paying, we're trying to get new officers.
But if I could, council member,
ahead.
if we're going to spend it, and we know we're going to spend it, let's do it at one time, because it's more efficient for us from a purchasing standpoint to do something like that at one time, and we may get a better deal if we buy several pieces than if we split it up over time, because then you're saying 2 different bids at 2 different times of the year, and we're going to have a better price now, and the price is going to go up like everything goes up. So if we're going to do it, and we know we're going to do it, my suggestion is, let's just get it done.
And I agree that the fire department, I don't know if everybody else agrees, but I think the fire department also needs an update on their equipment. And I think that you might get a better deal going through Rare with Tony Lipinski, because they just replaced all the new equipment up at Rare.
Yeah, it's the same company.
Same company.
I used them in my,
Good.
Frazier. It's the same company.
'Cause I know that their maintenance, and the insurance that they have on that equipment was really done quite well, so.
They do a great job.
So what did they do with their old equipment?
The old equipment,
What did Rare do with the old
I don't know what they did.
equipment?
That was brand new when we opened
they may
Rare.
have donated it.
So why they didn't donate it to the police department and the fire department?
They're probably getting rid of it for a reason.
They didn't, we
Sometimes it could be new, you know.
We had previously donated to Rare, and it was
Yeah.
very minimal amount of equipment when they first opened, and when Rare expanded with the senior center, they expanded that personal equipment room. The equipment that's in the fire department, I know, came from the YMCA when they got rid of their equipment, so.
It's old.
When was the last time they got equipment?
New equipment?
Yes.
Police department doesn't have any, do they?
Never.
No, a lot of it, some of the officers bring their old equipment from home. Some equipment's been donated, and it's in very poor shape. This
when-
company that we want to bring out, they come out every year for a few $100s. They inspect all the equipment, they tighten the belts, You know, they make sure the control board's working properly, they vacuum all the dust off the motor, and that's what keeps the equipment running.
And
for
I
years.
think that same company will provide a personal trainer on a minimal basis.
And they map out the rooms, they come in, they measure the square footage, they tell you where to, they tell you what equipment that you should have, or what your requests are, and they map out the room, they place the equipment on a it's a pretty nice deal.
I
what
think
they
the
do.
equipment that you currently have, we used to have a juvenile officer named Mac, and he had a physical training place on 9 Mile Road, where Rogers is now. And
Right.
I think the equipment came from his place when
Yeah.
he went to the gas station.
So, Councilwoman Owens, I think I had one proposal for you so that we break more even on the equipment. Why don't we, well, I know we went up 10 grand on overtime again. I mean, so that's 5 grand a week in overtime. What if we just reduce overtime 15, and that would pay for the workout equipment, or 18, whichever. How are we
Councilman,
doing
I-
5,000 a week in overtime?
If I may,
I say, I'm fine with reducing some of the overtime.
If you, I can add on more,
Well, actually, if your staffing comes up, you'll probably eliminate a lot of your
That's what we're
overtime.
Once the staffing's fully trained, I can assure you the overtime will be reduced.
So should we talk about, staffing first and then go to overtime?
well,
I mean, I don't know.
Relaine, you get done, then we're gonna
sounds like I
open it.
transitioned
Yeah.
over to you on that one.
No, that's.
You were just so eager, Cardi.
Well, you guys want to go through the positions that he's recommending? So start with like the school liaison positions?
Well, first we gotta finish the CIP. We were on the CIP, so what do you guys?
Okay, well, if you have more questions on CIP, I'm sorry, I thought we were kind of done.
No, we were still talking about the equipment, so.
Oh, well, I think our conversation's gonna save enough money to pay for the equipment
that's
this
how it
next
rolled over.
Yeah, yeah.
My understanding is what Director presented, council would like to see represented in the budget.
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Mr.
Well, are
Seal.
we,
We would need to go back and talk about staffing.
Council may wish to refer to page 12 of your budget document where all these positions are identified in terms of costs, so you actually have a real number in front of you.
It's page 97.
Page 12,
Page 12 is in his
Oh,
budget
in the
message.
yeah, right.
budget message.
His budget message. Okay, we'll start with the school liaisons. Move this here. Anyone have a recommendation?
that's the most important to me out of all of the
But
positions.
I have, I know that there are a lot of grants to do that, so,
I'm wondering if we should allocate a proportion of what the salary would be.
We are.
To be put aside for the school liaison, positions upon approval of an agreement with the schools.
because I'm wondering if the school will split that position.
Actually, we are splitting because we're assigning a veteran officer, and a veteran officer does not cost $94,000. A veteran officer costs $120,000, and we're only charging the school $94,000. So the school is getting a significant discount as to what the actual cost would be.
I'm fine with, in my opinion, I'm fine with paying for half of the school liaison, for one school liaison officer. I'm fine with covering $60,000 or $50,000 towards a school liaison officer for one school liaison officer.
So Geneva, I know that the budget was just discussed this past week at your board meeting, correct? Did that come up in your budget?
so if a veteran officer, we're not gonna have someone we hire who's a career officer who's gonna develop a pension and things like that, right?
No, we still have a pension, full defined benefit pension plan, so all the costs essentially will continue. Liability costs, veteran pension. The only difference is the retiree health care, the OPEB, isn't there. But the person who will be assigned to that position will be a veteran officer who costs more than the new hire. The proposal in the budget into the school district that we made was, we will charge you the lowest cost for one of our officers, which it will be a new officer coming in about $94,425.
They have done. And like I said, I'm fine with paying for half because in the summertime and things like that, they're not gonna be at the schools. So
Correct.
they are gonna be working for the city and they are gonna be providing city services in the summer. They're not gonna be located at the schools.
Unless they take their vacation during the summer when the schools are not in
And
session.
And they may, but I don't think we can also force them to take their vacation during the summer. So they might take it during the school year. And so I think that the city paying for half of one school liaison officer, I would personally be okay with.
But they also have summer school.
They sure do.
And there are a lot of
just not
students in summer school.
You know, based on my experience, when I worked in the Fraser School District, the school paid 75% of the officer's salary for the school year. Those, the 3 months that were left over, the officer would go to normal patrol duties or put on programs such as crime prevention programs. So the school was only responsible for paying that salary for the 8 or 9 months the officer was in the school. And, you know, another idea that I had too, if the school cannot afford to put an officer in the school, maybe we can work out something where the officer can, because we do, I just want to get this clarified. We have a juvenile officer, but he's playing 3 roles. He's a detective, he's a juvenile officer, handles all the complaints at the schools or within the city. He attends juvenile courts, he seeks petitions on the juvenile. So we do have an officer that handles a lot of work at the school. Plus, we spend a lot of resources at the school. Our officers are there almost every day. Right now, I have 3 patrol cars after school for the remainder of the school year to hang out and by the schools. We're pulling the resources away from the rest of the community just to concentrate on the schools because it's important. And if the officer can get a separate office in the school, maybe for a couple hours a day, maybe we can do that at no cost to the school. Plus, the officer's in the school, he can work on his work, he can tie into his computer at work, plus he can walk in the hallways. You know, I say start it off like that. Let's start off with baby steps and we'll see how it works. But it would be no charge to the school, and I think we can let our officer out an hour, maybe 2 a day. I can't guarantee you every day, but certainly he would be instructed to try to go there every day for an hour or 2. You know, spend some time with the administration, spend some time talking with the students, and any issues they have, they can go to him.
Okay. I'm trying to see where you get this 94,000 from.
Well, actually, Councilmember Lucido and Director are sort of on the same page. Director said in his previous employer, the school district paid 75%. We're looking at about 75% right now on the charge of who's actually going to be assigned and what we're paying. So remember, a veteran officer will be assigned, that's about $120,000. We're charging only $94,000, which is about 78%. So the dollar value that Director had referenced is about where we're at right now.
Right, but I was really saying I'd be up to paying for 50%.
Okay.
I was saying, but well, I think what the director is suggesting right now is a good way to start to see how it works out having that officer in the school for just a couple hours without even moving forward with hiring a different officer right now.
Yes, if the school, and I don't know if the school can provide the officer with a separate office in case he has to, you know,
Right.
deal with student issues and they want some privacy. You know, I think it's a good step. You know, we can see where it goes and we'll take it on from there if the
So have
school
you
doesn't want
talked
to
this
pay.
over with Ryan?
I have discussed this with Dr. McLeod. I even told him what we were going to be billing. Apparently, it never made it to the school board. Oh, it did? Okay. It just wasn't in the budget.
Right, wasn't like, we discussed actually today that very idea of putting an officer in the school for a few hours a day in his own office. We actually had that conversation.
So do you think they would go with the 50%?
Well, I think right now we're just gonna try putting our juvenile officer in there for a few hours a day to see how that goes first.
Yes, and like I said, I can't guarantee you every day because sometimes we may have a dozen prisoners. He has to help with the prisoners, but I will do my absolute best to make certain. And I have spoken to the juvenile officer about this before, and he has no issue. But I think there was talk before about there was no room at the school for an office for him. But I think that's important that if we do this, he does have a separate office so he can keep his documents and and work on his work there and tie in with the city computer.
I think there's gotta be room. When I go in the counseling office, there always looks like there's some room down at the end of that one hall.
Down the main hall. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, yeah. I would definitely.
Because they've changed the office of the principal and everything, so I think there's gotta be room in that big old building.
I like the idea for now because it doesn't lock us into an obligation. We don't hire another officer, we end up not having funded. Also, I do think I don't have a problem, like if we do end up with a dedicated officer, I'm not against a veteran officer, but I think a juvenile officer makes more sense.
Absolutely.
Or someone at least who has background.
And we would have to follow the collective bargaining agreement. If there's a special assignment, it has to be posted, and anybody that's interested can apply for the position and be interviewed for the position. We just can't arbitrarily select an officer, because of this and that. We have to follow the collective bargaining process.
Well, in the past, several of the firefighters have done extra duty over there on their day off. They've all worked as security officers over there.
I don't even know if that would be allowable. If they get injured, then
Well, I think the school hired them.
I would never permit that.
All right, so should we move on to
Actually,
the
they did a really
traffic?
good job.
Should we move on to the
Well-
traffic officer?
Well, so,
Oh,
what did we?
Right
Uh,
now,
s-
we're gonna eliminate both school liaisons. We're gonna put the juvenile officer over there. We're gonna try to a couple hours a day to see how it works out. Because it seems like right now the schools are unsure if they even really want a school liaison for sure in there, full-time.
don't agree
I didn't
with
think that, I didn't think that was up in the air. They do want it.
Yeah.
They definitely. No, I think so I guess before we do move on,
Okay, I'm confused. I thought you guys did not approve to help pay for a school liaison officer.
this is two different questions. I think
Okay.
she's saying they'd love to have one, but don't have
They
the
can't
money.
afford it.
I think for me, it seems to be for sure out of this, if we're gonna hire one more officer, it should be this officer because it's important to the community. I mean, there's a few thousand people in the schools, right? It's in our city. It's not like it's a separate entity, and we are there often. I think the community would love it, and I think it would be great. I would like to see, and Madam Mayor, you mentioned grants too. Maybe Grant can pay for part of this, but I'd like it to at least go forward this. The school district could use help. I mean, this is where we can, I think, coordinate with the school and grow our relationship with the district here by helping in this area. So maybe they can pay teachers more instead of paying an officer.
So you wanna pay for the whole officer or half, like?
Yeah, some officer where, I mean,
I'd like to try what
Director?
the director, I don't know whether to call him the chief or the
We
Call me
could
director.
still
George.
put-
George is fine.
We could still put $60,000 aside towards paying half for an officer for the school, if the school would like to meet us halfway and pay for half.
But otherwise, I'd like to see how
Yes.
the youth officer works.
Maybe like a pilot program for 6 months. We'll get some feedback from the school, the superintendent, to see what's working right, wrong, and how we can tweak it. And maybe we can, revisit this again, but
I
at least
think-
try
We
it.
can always amend our budget later to add it.
I think that's a really great idea. In the meantime, there might be a lot of funds coming down from the state, you never know.
Yes.
so,
I just said yes, that we can have an officer in the office.
real time here.
So,
Okay.
I'd like the officer I like the school board to have if they could just come to a school board meeting and meet the school board too. I think would be a huge step. We don't just, force them into the school. I'd really, really like that step to happen and have a
Do we know when the
conversation at
next school
the.
board meeting is?
Yeah, it's the second Monday.
Second Monday.
What did Ryan agree to, having one or paying for one?
agreeing to having one.
What about paying? Can you text him back? Is he gonna help pay?
And I would have to go,
I've had conversations with.
Said no?
$97,000, we don't have a budget for that.
Okay.
We don't have, we don't have, we only got $30,000 for that.
I think this would be good to try it out.
This would be a good
initially and then move on.
We have nothing to lose by trying.
Right.
I'm,
Presence is what we need, and that would be wonderful.
Yep.
Because then the officer can build a report up, and then when we're able to afford it, then they already have somebody in.
I think when you get your K-9 officer all trained too, it would be really good to just go visit.
Oh, absolutely. They love the canine.
Well, and
everybody
they-
loves the canine.
Yeah, and the K-9 officer always goes to all the schools,
Yep.
because
Well,
your
we're definitely gonna
problems
do
are
that.
not just at the high school, you have problems in other schools as well.
Actually, I was gonna say, I think the canine visited one time while I was going to the high school,
Yeah.
but it wasn't just for
Was it
a
just
friendly
for a visit?
visit, yeah. A friendly visit would be nice.
He was working too.
Yeah, he was working, yeah.
Usually in October, the police and fire at one time go over to the schools, and they have a big day, and they all come out for, October is fire prevention month, but, you know, the police never like it when the fire are taking over the attention of the school kids, so,
Fire get all the attention.
yeah, who was it, what was his name, that had Tico? Tico was the hit of all the schools.
All right,
So
the
we were saying
question.
60K? Oh.
Well,
Well, I think we're just gonna wait and budget it later if we need to.
I had a question for the
If they
director.
can come up, okay.
Well, I
Well,
had
you
a
can go ahead
question.
and make that motion.
Okay,
I
Councilwoman.
still had a question. So do you feel, since we're already short-staffed, taking an officer away from the street to go into the school for a couple hours instead of just hiring one, that they can be there all day? 'Cause
Well,
we still taking away, somebody's, we're
It's-
still, you know what I'm saying? We're still
it's-
taking away from something instead of
absolutely.
just predominantly just hiring one for the school,
But
period.
What's nice is the officer will have a computer at the school that links into the work computer, because a lot of times he'll spend all morning typing reports. He can do it at the school in the office, and people can come in. He can still talk to students and things like that, but,
So that
again,
officer is not on the street?
no, he's a detective. Sometimes he manages prisoners, sometimes they do follow-up work. He's also the traffic safety officer, so if anyone has traffic complaints, they call his direct number. So he's wearing three hats, but I've spoken with him before about this, and he says it shouldn't be an issue. Again, let's just try it, and if it is, we'll address it. I mean, this is something new. I think it's worth a shot to look at.
I'm just saying, I know you were talking about the mismanagement at the department. Now you're talking about taking somebody away from the department
Well,
to go to the school, and then I'm just,
He's
who's
only
gonna
gonna
take
be
it, who's gonna
gone-
take his place when he's at the school?
If they're tied up, let's say they have 15 prisoners and we have to arraign them, unfortunately, he won't be able to go to the school that day. I cannot guarantee he'll be at the school every day, but I will make it certain that when he does have time, he's there, just for a few hours. And,
Maybe I can back us up one step that'll maybe make this easier to discuss. So the current, Joseph, your current budget then budgets for,
It's a zero,
The-
it's a zero-sum budget. It authorizes the position, and there's no cost to the city by this budget. So in other words, if we don't fill it, we don't get the money. So it literally could stay in the budget.
He didn't budget anything for this position.
It's
no,
budget-
not just a specific position. Sorry, for the, okay. Let me, for the whole entire PD, because so this is how I'm thinking about it. There's a whole bunch of different types of officers here. Clearly, all of us, including George, are not on the same, same wavelength in terms of which officers are most important. Some of us would like to see certain types more than others. How much more is this budget altogether than last year?
1.4 officers, so that's essentially 425 times 1.4. In terms of personnel costs, $132,195.
So essentially, if we spend 132 in new officers right now, we break even with what the budget is. If we have different officers, then
And that assumes
We still-
everyone who we say is going to be reimbursed in one shape or another is going to be.
well, no, I get that for your whole thing. But if we just said let's hire one officer for 132K or whatever,
Well, that's
we're still
94.
breaking even. I'm just making up a
Well,
thing.
I mean, I think it kind of varies because like there are certain things like if a traffic officer is gonna be writing tickets, where a school I mean, is not gonna be writing tickets. I mean, maybe once in a
Well,
great while after
they'll be in the
school,
school if
but,
there's a fight or something.
yeah, I mean, but it's not gonna be like a resource.
No,
The same with the MATS officer, that's 60% funded. Now, that officer, like, we can't put him in the school because, I mean, it's a specific, that's why the county's funding it.
No, I get that part. I'm just, well, so I guess I essentially want to make sure we do have funding for a school liaison officer. Like, I wouldn't want to just say, let's kind of try it. Let's put, like, I think Councilwoman Owens is saying, let's put specific.
On a long-term basis, because remember, this budget is created for long-term. Remember, as we looked at the 5-year forecast, we're in like year 4 where we're looking at negative 274 on operational costs. I'm confident that things will be happening over the next several years, rather in terms of decreases in expenses or increases in revenue, where we're going to be able to really get a firmly structural, balanced budget based on operational costs. So council shouldn't be too concerned right now because it seems like it's something reasonable that we can balance in the long term. But let's assume that both school liaison officers are hired and we don't get reimbursed. Well, then my confidence I just expressed to you is not there anymore.
So, I mean, I'm fine with approving to pay for 50% of a for one school liaison officer.
All right.
If you want to put that in the budget. I mean, I'm fine with that.
But I would like to try George's idea
I think
first.
until we get someone trained, if the school agrees to it, I mean, the school's still gonna have to agree to pay for the other 50%. And until then, yes, I think we should try George's idea.
If council wants to put money for that, that's fine. I think it's unnecessary to do today. Because I'm concerned about, I don't want to hire anyone until there's guaranteed funding or a way that we can balance the
I agree
budget.
with that.
Because, I mean, looking at the police patrol, the budget difference between last year and this upcoming year for patrol personnel is $393,000. So, I mean, we're looking at all the other officers and increasing the department. I'm weary of just
I would
saying okay to a bunch of
I
things.
would rather hold back in the liaison and look at the other grades of officers that were proposed. I really think that we need to sink as much money as possible within our budget into the police department, because I think we have some dramatic changes, and I think the people are paying for it, and I hear that all the time. We are paying for public safety, and they want to see that and they want to hear it. And I think for you to develop the neighborhood watch program and all these other
No,
things,
I
you
mean,
need the support.
I agree with all that, but we do have a motion on the floor, I think.
What is the motion?
I motioned for 50% to pay for 50% of one liaison officer upon the school district's approval. Or coming up with an agreement with the schools.
I guess I'm really confused. So are you saying that you don't want George's idea to put it?
I want George's idea until
Just put some money
the
behind.
school, will have it set aside until the school board approves it, or finds the money to be able to.
My understanding, Mayor, is that administratively, director will assign an officer to the school district, which does not have an effect on the budget document whatsoever. And what Councilmember Lucido is proposing is that, should we come to an agreement with the school district, the city will agree to pay up to 50% of the cost of an officer.
Correct.
My whole thing is, I agree with putting some money aside, is that are we taking a resource from the city and just directing it at the school when we can just have, a police officer there? Because the last budget, we had money for a community police officer.
No, we didn't.
Yes, we did. For this year, we did have one.
That was the
We did.
sergeant's position, which became the record supervisor.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor.
No
and
support yet.
No,
Yeah,
Kearney supported
yeah.
it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
DeMonico,
Yes.
Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Owens,
Yep.
Pixley.
Yes.
So now,
Now let's look at the other staffing officers.
Next one would be the traffic officer. And we're saying that we can get that 100% reimbursed.
We are
I gotta-
speculating that.
I got a
but-
question. Should we do this by each individual section, or should we just do an overall patrol officers? Which way do you prefer?
Do you want my opinion?
Yes, because you're gonna place them, I feel like where you
I
think is
need
the most
bodies.
important.
I don't know how many bodies you're gonna allow me to hire, but if you tell me the number, then I can separate them. I need to prioritize the positions.
I agree, I mean, he's the one that's gonna
You may
have
say, you
to-
may think the traffic is a priority, I may think another position is a priority, so I just need a number. Tell me the number, and then I'll take it from there. I think that's the easiest
I
way.
like
And then
to-
the number will determine what the
I'd like
cost
to go
is.
to
Yes.
the middle. I'd
I'm
like to
fine
go to
with-
45.
I think four.
45.
Would you say
44.
four?
45.
45 is
Are
the,
you talking about this adequate plan, right? Is that, that's what the
I'm
45
coming up right
means,
in the
right?
middle. Yeah, the adequate plan.
I'm fine with 44.
The 45 gives you 8s on every shift,
No 44.
and it gives you all your
I'm saying
units.
I'm
Just making
fine with
it up.
approving 44 officers. I know, in his plan, there was no 44, but there will be 45 if we hire a school, so
Okay.
it would be up to 45 then.
All right, are you making a motion?
Okay. I think, well, okay.
Go ahead, no, see.
I'd probably actually go one less than that. I think 3 new positions in 1 year is a lot, because we're gonna have to get patrol cars. I think a department should grow slowly, not super quick, but
I just think that
We
we
might not
have
need
such
any
a
new patrol
rising
cars.
incidence of crime going on, particularly
It's-
during the night hours.
I don't even know it's about growing it. We're struggling right now. We're drowning, and I see it every day. I hear it every day, not just from the officers, but from the people the residents.
We see
I
overtime.
talk to them at the council meetings. They call me. They come in my office. I see what's going on, and I'll be honest, and I was honest yesterday, the 40 officer model does not work for this city. When you're doing 26,000 calls for service per year, it doesn't work.
The only thing, George, is that not the Mats, but the detectives in the NARC group that we had before.
Well, here's one thing I didn't mention
I just don't
last
think
week.
that's gonna be cost efficient.
What I was gonna do is, I was gonna remove the sergeant from the detective bureau. He would be in charge of the drug unit.
Okay.
So I'm not adding a supervisor, I'm just transferring him. And those duties that he has now, we're gonna spread them out amongst the department members. And then the 2 patrolmen obviously would be assigned to the unit. So you're not adding a supervisor, 2 patrolmen would be assigned to that unit. You need I gotta tell you, Mayor, it's very embarrassing when every day another agency comes into our town to do a raid. They're cleaning our house up here. That should be our job. I don't like when other communities come in here every single day and conduct raids and drug buys when that's our function, and and there's no reason why we can't do it. We have an issue, but it can be corrected.
Do you think it's gonna reduce the overtime everybody's concerned about?
Having a drug crew?
Do you think it's gonna reduce the overtime?
having your 45,
Well,
having your 45 staff
oh,
department.
yes. When you have your shifts at 8s, somebody can call in 6, somebody can be in training, it doesn't impact overtime, but when your midnight shift's at 6, then a guy's injured, anytime somebody calls in, it's overtime automatically.
All right, so, Michael, did you have anything more? Otherwise, I'm gonna make the motion that Sarah already made.
which is the 44.
44.
I'm willing to support 44, but I want to mention that I think that we should
Reduce some of the
go,
overtime.
go with the department's request for overtime, $100,000 less. I've never seen, to be frank, I've never seen a city manager get a request from a department and then add 100,000 to it. If the department head says, I think I can work with this, I would like to if we have to amend it later, that's fine. Because I do understand emergencies come up and you can't control that,
Is
but.
that in that second line item
Yeah.
that we got?
Yeah,
You're saying the 100, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because, yeah, and then I had a question, I guess, that goes along with that, so that'd save 100. If we're saying we're going to do 44 officers, it depends how much, because you're saying,
We're gonna hire 4 police officers, so they would be new police officers.
And with 44, you have all your units.
The ones that are actually gonna take these specialty units are probably ones that are already working for
Yes.
us. The new ones will become patrol officers, I'm assuming.
You have all your units at 44, and your shifts would be 8, and we'd probably put 7 on midnights, because the workload's not as great as the afternoon shifts. And I think that would work out fine, 44.
Well, all the who's who, I just wanted to understand better the number kind of that we're looking at then, because if, it depends on who we're hiring according to this list, how much it
You
costs.
said that all the specialty units would be full,
Right,
so, and it would be 887 for the road patrol shift.
and then
You would
100,
cut one off the shift, that's it. But you would have
It would be, according to this.
You'd have a
45
traffic
list, it said
officer.
It would be 887.
You'd have a guy in mats, you'd have your traffic position, and you'd have your 2 narcotic officers, and you have 887 on the shifts.
so Joseph, what's the rough math
4
on
extra.
then that, I'm trying to,
Well, the only difference will be is you're cutting 94,425 because you're not hiring your road patrol officer. I'm looking at net costs, not gross.
We would be saving about 95,000,
plus the 100 in overtime then.
yes.
So really, he said an increase in 130, but
You're actually cutting the net cost to the city.
so it'd be 70 less than what's proposed.
But
But
can I
then we're
intervene?
adding, but then we did add 50% for the school liaison, so you gotta add that on.
So we do come out to about this 70 plus,
You might be net even.
Can I intervene for 1
Well,
second?
we have, a couple officers leaving, so we hired 4 and we about to lose. It don't make sense. I mean, the succession plan should be in here. I don't think we doing that.
Well,
well, and those would be
theoretically, if council wants I'm gonna call it the succession plan, we can budget for, I'm gonna call it the 1 year only, extra money to hire people now. We have room this fiscal year to bring them on today if we could. But to actually get us through what I'm gonna call retirement phase 1 in the next 18 months, we could put additional dollars in there to get that succession plan going, so when the officers leave at the end of calendar year 2019, we will have officers ready to replace them. We could build in a succession plan financially that would affect 1 year. That may be your $100,000 from the overtime. That may be the succession plan costs for 1 year.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe we should do the adequate assessment where he put on here for 45 officers, and then I would agree with you lessening the overtime.
Well, you could build it into the budget and then come forward with the plan at the time that you've got the succession plan budgeted, defined.
Let's just put it out this way. We anticipate that we could have 3 officers retire by December 31st this year. If I'm going to call it the 24th man on road patrol wasn't filled as the 24th man, and it was budgeted for the course of a year, and you hire 2 people to be in training for 6 months, that covers 1 man for a year, but it also fills 2 of those, I'm going to call those transitional positions. That leaves 1 out there that's sort of floating that we really don't have a succession plan for.
I don't want to expand it more than what Sarah proposed. Cardi, were you looking at kind of how the balance, from year to year is on the whole department?
This is complicated to, so the list on page 12, Joseph was saying, if these reimbursed numbers are correct, say a traffic officer pays for itself, the auto theft 60% reimbursed, narcotics indirectly reimbursed. That was 100, and we hired, that was the 45 adequate plan, right? It cost us 132,000 more from last year, is what we were saying, right?
Correct. $132,000 net additional costs to the budget for personnel. Not necessarily more than last year because we've got a bad number because we didn't have a fully staffed department. But in terms of overall net costs to the budget, to the city,
Oh, to what we budgeted last year, is that what you're saying, or just?
$132,000 of additional costs for operating a police department for this fiscal year.
I'm
Okay.
I really don't want to add any more money to it. I would rather just I will make a motion to increase the patrol officers by, what is it, 4 positions?
You said to 44, the 44 plan.
44 plan.
Well, yeah, my question was just, how much is that going to cost?
132,000, whatever that number was I gave you earlier.
But so if we're doing 44, that's,
Plus, we're adding 50% for the school liaison, so add another 45 to that. Take away the 100,000 for the overtime. 32 and 45 is $77,000 net cost to the city, and that does not include any cost for a succession plan. So therefore, we will not be able to fill a vacancy until someone retires. I just want council to be aware of that. So it'll be 8 months before we potentially could have a position filled. So even though we may have a fully staffed department on budget, in practicality, we will not get that department fully staffed until everyone is done retiring, and 8 months after that.
So can we utilize, I think I read 210,000, that's in the drug forfeiture fund. Can we utilize any of that?
No, that's
Salaries.
for the police vehicles. That's already targeted for the police vehicles. From a finance standpoint, we have the funds to pay for a transition plan for police
What
officers.
police vehicles are you talking about? Because I thought we were just going into the lease agreement.
That's how we're paying for them, out of that particular fund.
But don't they all have to be used for a certain purpose? or-
No. The police vehicles can be purchased out with drug forfeiture funds. That's a permitted use,
For use anywhere,
anywhere,
at any time?
anytime.
Yes, law enforcement purposes.
If council is concerned about money, don't worry about whatever the money it will take to cover the transition succession plan for retiring police officers. The city has that money that we can spend on a one-time basis. We have those funds. If it's $100,000 or $200,000, we have that. We're not going to be hurt because that's a one-time expense.
Yes, but it's a one-time expense that would occur every time someone retires and we're doing this
But
succession
this
paradigm.
ends in 18 months. This retirement
Have you
cycle ends.
actually received any retirement notices yet?
Well,
Director?
they typically wait to the last minute. And I says, hey, do me a favor, please, because it's just, you know how, when I did my presentation yesterday, it takes forever to hire somebody. And out of courtesy, you know, you should give at least, try to give 6 months' notice so we can better prepare ourselves. But, you know, a lot of people say they are, at least 2 lieutenants I heard of that are retiring, but I haven't received anything yet.
Right,
And
I
they're
mean,
not gonna
that's
tell me.
where I come in, I mean, I'm concerned, like, what if you hire those 2 officers?
Right.
And then they don't retire, are you
Right.
gonna fire those 2 officers? I mean,
Well,
you can't,
we're
can't
dealing
do
with
that.
we're dealing with 2 things. We want to bring, number one, we want to bring our staffing levels. If the number's
Right.
44, that's perfect. And as long as I'm here, I'm never going to ask you again to exceed 44. I just won't, because I know this will work.
Yeah.
Then, secondly, you have officers that are going to be retiring. You have up to 9 that could potentially retire by 2020, November of 2020. So that's a different beast we have to take on. And I'll be honest with you, it's going to take forever and train 9 officers, but we're going to do our best. But that's 2 issues what we're dealing with right now. And but once those 9 are gone, you may not see a retirement for another 4 or 5 years here. It's like a roller coaster. But right now, I mean, we're at a point where all the older officers, the veteran officers, they can leave. They're eligible to leave.
And I understand the concern, but I mean, if you go back to 2014, with the staffing levels you're gonna have right now, we were operating at 8 less officers. I mean, so yes, will be an inconvenience, of course, but I think that if the time comes, I think we're gonna be able to tough through it.
I guess, I don't think you guys are looking
But
at
we
the
can always
time,
do a
though.
budget amendment also.
Yes, at that time, I mean, if you do have like 4 that come up all at once, we could probably.
But once again, I want to stress to council, if you're concerned about the money, this isn't one where you need to be concerned about, number one. Number two, that lead time, and if we don't recruit and hire at the appropriate times of the year, trying to find someone is just going to extend that lead time. You're authorizing a fully, I'm going to call it a fully staffed department at 44 officers. We can get there, but if we don't have the succession plan concurrent with the 44 officer plan, we're not going to be there. And it's just going to continue this vicious cycle in the department. I really believe it's critical. I don't think this is a money issue. I think this is more of a support for smooth transitions. It will help reduce employee stress levels. It will free up the employees to be able to take their time off that they need. This isn't a money issue if that's what council's concern is. I don't want to say I'm going out on a limb saying I know for sure that all of these officers are going to retire, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to be retiring. I've had a couple come up to me and indicate, yes, they're going to be leaving as well. Have they filed the official paperwork? No. Can we make them file the official paperwork yet? No, we can't. But I think the director can actually go back to the department and talk to these officers and have a sit-down with them and say, this is for your budget as a department. This is for the guys that are going to be here after you're gone. Do you have plans on leaving? How sure are you of it? And based on that, then we can determine how many people we need to bring in. The other thing is we are limited as to the number of officers we can train at one time with field training officers. So even though we may approve to hire additional 4 officers and start the transition plan for another 4 to 9, realistically, we've got 6 months for maybe 5 officers in training, then we'll hire another 5-6 months later, and then we'll hire another 5-6 months later. So it's not like we're going to be bringing everyone on board immediately. It's a transition that has a practical difficulty to it, but in the long run, it's going to work, and the city's in a better place, and the department's in a better place, and it's not a financial drain to the city. We can afford it. This isn't a question of cost. I think we need to concentrate more on what the officers need and what the department needs so that we can provide the best service to the taxpayers. And this is one of those instances where we have to invest a little bit of money now to have the dividends into the future.
I think, so one thing about retirement real quick, I think maybe this is what people probably were thinking yesterday. Can we be more careful about talking about retirement? We mentioned, well, not we, you mentioned Mary Van Haren retiring yesterday. She had no idea what you were, I don't know what you were talking about. So
Yeah,
she's not retiring.
Well, she's not retiring tomorrow, but she will be retiring within the next 3 years.
Oh, she said she's not. She said she's not.
She said she doesn't.
Right after you said that, she said she's not.
She said she has no plan to retiring.
I don't know if we keep depleting her papers. She, I mean, her department, she might.
So
All
I
right,
think
so
we're
we
saying
have a
we're
motion.
fine with,
Yeah,
we're fine with
I think there
the
was a
plan.
motion and
Yeah.
support on the
We have a
floor.
So
motion.
I'll stop talking.
Do you want to repeat your motion?
Yeah, I motion to increase the staffing at the police department to 44 officers.
Support.
Can we add, well, and
wanna
amend
add the
to
succession?
we're doing the specialty officers and it's 100,000 and 100,000 less in overtime costs, right? That was gonna be all.
Well, yeah, we can do the overtime cost separate, or?
Actually, I was interpreting that motion to be the 44 plan being increased to 44, 50% school officer, and reduce overtime by 100,000.
All right, that's my motion.
Okay, I just.
Do we have support?
Support.
Please call the roll.
Now, what were we doing about the succession plan with the money?
There will not be one.
If you want to make that motion, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to.
Let's finish this one first.
So Councilmember Lucido on the 44 plan. Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Owens,
Yes.
Pixley,
Yes.
DeMonico.
Yes.
Thank you.
So am I making a motion to make a succession plan for the police department?
And do you want to put a dollar amount in that?
I would like.
2 officers would be the 94,425. That would get us through calendar year December 31st, 2019.
What's that amount again?
94,425. That would get us through December 31st.
That's for one officer?
That would essentially be 2 officers prepared to take over for 2 retirements.
Well, I make a motion to create a succession plan for the police department to hire 2 officers for the fiscal year of 2020, was that 2020?
December 31st, 2019.
Okay, December 31st, 2019, in the amount of $94,425.
Do we have support? Please call the roll.
Who supported?
Oh, nobody did? Cardi, did you?
No,
Well,
All right, motion
I-
dies.
yeah, I think I'm I'm fine with trying this out, I guess.
That's fine.
All right, can we also look, George's presentation yesterday also included some updating of the policies and procedures, and I think those are probably
Yeah.
pretty critical. So,
They are included, so if council wants it removed, but they are in the budget.
I had no objection to any of the, I think the one thing you said you didn't need was like the extra Supreme
The support,
whatever.
Yeah, I think that I was gonna say,
$100.
that's the only thing, and police and fire for that service,
Yeah.
is removing that,
That can be removed.
yeah.
and just remember, this is an annual
The support
fee.
plus, to remove the support plus from police and fire.
So are we getting it? That's what you're saying?
We'll get, I mean, I'm fine with approving the Lexi pool, just not paying for the support plus, which was $7,000.
That was the one you said.
Yes.
They didn't really need.
okay. So all we need then is a motion to delete that, support plus.
I don't even think you need a motion, Mayor. That's
It's already.
rounding error in terms of the budget. We can just make that go away at the director's request.
All right,
Fire department?
fire department.
Did we do the property room audit? Was that part of it?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, I mean, I'm
I'm-
fine with supporting the property room audit too.
Very much for that.
Yes, I think it's very important.
We've all been there. It needs it. And so that's already in the budget. We don't need to do anything with that, correct?
Correct.
All right, let's go to the fire department.
And I'm fine with approving the Lexi pool for the fire department minus the support plus also.
Can I go back to the Lexi pool for both? Don't we, with the policy and procedures, can't the lawyer look over that?
That's a lot of time. They have a whole staff of lawyers and retired professionals on a board there that have policies, national policies and updated court decisions. I don't know, I don't even know if we want to attempt that. It may
Well, we
even
just put
cost more
extra money
money.
aside for extra duties for our attorney, so could he do that?
Maybe.
How many hours? do you
I
think-
mean, we just
How
put
many
money
hours do you think
aside.
it would take you to do something like that?
Couldn't even begin to.
Listen,
Do
Rybar,
you think it would be more than 30 hours?
remember Rybar tried to do that with our policies and
Well, he gets a whole year.
procedures?
We have a couple.
For the
hundred
city.
30
and that-
hours would already, at $100 an hour,
Try to make it work.
would be, I mean, I think that fiscally responsible would be better to use this.
But,
I mean,
but
we haven't used it.
the key
since.
here is when there's a change in a policy in a court decision, they notify you immediately to make the change. Plus, you're comparing your policies with their model policies, and they're telling you what to change. So in the event we do go to accreditation, it's all gonna fall into place. I don't know if you can keep up with that. I
I'm
mean,
going to defer to the director on that topic.
These people do it all the time, and they come in and they're so fast at it. Going back to the fire department, I really think we need to add that position of fire marshal. I think for buildings purposes and licenses, as well as our residential health insurance, not health insurance, but house insurance.
I disagree. I don't think we need to hire the fire marshal. We did have a fire marshal up to 13, but that was before we had a public safety director.
But the public safety director covers both departments, and he's not over there.
Well, I should say we had a fire chief. We had a fire chief up to 13. We eliminated the fire chief.
And we had a fire marshal along with the fire chief.
Right, and
at
now we
that-
have,
at
and now,
that time,
and now we have a
kept-
deputy fire chief and a public safety director. So our staffing right now would be exactly the same,
No, it's not.
minus a half a person.
How many building inspections do you do?
how many do we do?
Yeah,
No,
fire.
you.
How many do I do? I'm not even trained in that.
Yeah, and how many people are trained in that right now in the fire
Zero.
department?
Zero. There
Zero.
was no plan.
There's no plan in it. I think it's one of the most key things, particularly because if you had a fire marshal go out with the building inspector, you might have avoided some of the problems that you found in some of the most recent
Yes.
fires.
It's very difficult. You have an administrator going out on inspections all day. He's not communicating effectively with his staff. Certain policies and procedures need to be up. The meetings, there's meeting after meeting after meeting, and between us both, we just can't do it. I mean, we're just stretched to the limit
And
right
the
now.
state fire marshal came up to me at the chief's meeting, and said, why don't you have one? That is one of the most key, important positions in your city.
Every department has a fire marshal.
So well, okay, so when it comes to
Yes,
historical staffing levels, I'm confused.
Yeah,
If you
you
go to
are.
page 233, it says that we do not have a fire chief, we only have a fire marshal. Okay,
Correct.
so who's our fire marshal right now?
Yeah.
Because it says that.
We have a
fiscal year-
shared position of deputy chief and fire marshal, and the deputy chief essentially runs the department day to day and in the spare time, when trained, would do fire
We
inspections.
eliminated the fire chief when we hired the public safety director, correct?
No.
According-
We've always had a
that's
public
what it says
safety
in here.
director.
I understand that, they just changed the title,
public
but
safety director is by
essentially,
charter.
the department, I mean, the role that George has now,
So for
he
the,
never went over to the fire department.
no, I know, but for the since 2000 and, since 14, this is, the setup we have now is the way we've been operating.
I know, and
With
that-
the exception of we have 3 more firefighters.
But that's why it's so bad right now, is you don't have any digitalization at all of your
They're handwriting
training
all the
records.
records. They're handwriting all the training records.
And you are so
That's
far behind in
unacceptable.
all of your building inspections.
There hasn't been a building inspection since Mr. Folkerts left.
And-
And the thing was, they knew he was leaving. Who do they send to the inspector school? Mr. Folkerts goes to the inspector school and he's retiring. Again, the idea is here, you want a succession plan, you have your deputy chief, he's trained in fire inspections, and you also have the fire marshal position trained in fire inspections. So in the event somebody retires or something happens to them, we always have a plan, a backup plan. And they work hand in hand with the building department every single day. And I just think it's crucial that we have a separate fire marshal.
I have a question. If we hired a fire marshal, would we be able to require landlords to get a fire safety inspection done on their properties?
That actually
semi-annually?
does happen right now.
It's actually
By the-
required
We
now.
are, not by the fire marshal, by the state building code, well, not the building code, but there's a fire code that our building department enforces for residential rental units that actually requires smoke detectors in every bedroom, smoke detector outside the hallway of bedrooms, smoke detector on every single level. We are not requiring hard wiring, but we are requiring 5-year batteries. So we are enforcing the state law. That is a state law, and it is being enforced, and it's being enforced by our rentals.
How many of the nurseries that have just opened have fire suppression equipment in them?
I can't speak to that because I do not know.
Because I don't even think they've been inspected. I think that there's a majority of them that don't even have the license.
I do know, and as clerk, I know that we do have a backup and a problem in terms of issuing business licenses, and we have in this case, we've got building inspectors who aren't really properly trained, who are willing to do fire-type inspections, but for the critical, technical, we have nobody. And we've got business licenses that theoretically we can't issue because we're not convinced that the building's up to par in terms of accurate fire suppression. And you can only go to your neighboring community for assistance every once in a while, because they have their responsibilities as well.
So that director of public safety, when McNeilans was hired, he never, ever did anything over there, so Folkerts
Not him,
actually
he
had to
really
do
do.
2 different jobs at
He
the
ain't
same
tell us he was
time.
right.
He had to be the fire marshal and the chief. And now you have an additional 3 people, three new fire officers over there?
Yes, there's 3.
And you're finally up to
They're
full
at
staff over
They're
there.
at full staff. They're finally after, I don't know how many years.
And remember, we did have the Sarisa millage?
Sarisa Millage.
Smorsa. The Smorsa millage that was passed, that my understanding is the fire department really did a lot of work for.
They did all the work.
A lot of work.
And
Well, there were a few of the police.
from our professional opinion is that the fire department needs to be staffed with a full-time chief and a full-time fire marshal.
Okay, no. If we went that route, we wouldn't need a public safety director. We would get rid of that position and have a police chief and a fire chief.
Well, the public safety director is by charter. So the public safety director,
I think
it oversees the position. We do not have a separate police chief. but we should have a properly a separate fire chief because our public safety director is more or less functioning as the police chief.
So how that all came about was the fire department started in 1921, and the person that was the fire marshal at that time also had police training, so, and he had been a constable before, that you don't even have that officer. And so in order to spread him between the two departments to give control and training on the police department, which was started in 1924, they made him the director of public safety. So you had a director of public safety then, but you did not have another one until Wendy pushed the position because it was in the charter.
In 14, they eliminated the police chief and the fire chief, and they hired a public safety director.
They ended that position of police chief, but they took the person that had been serving as the police chief and made him the deputy police.
No, we had a deputy police chief before then.
I know, that was Eric Kaiser, they elevated him, Bourgeois, I think Bourgeois came up
I know you
and,
used to have an inspector position here.
And that was elevated
Calabrese.
to deputy chief.
Yes, and they changed the title.
check and see when the inspector was
We
in.
combined the
It wasn't,
chief,
it had to be before 11. I only go to 2011.
we combined the chief positions into a public safety director to save money because we had to. I just, if we are going to go back to that paradigm, then a public safety director doesn't make sense.
I would rather see
Either it's
putting
combined
that-
or it's not, is
I'm
my
sorry.
opinion. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I would rather see putting that money right now towards a new fire truck that we're gonna need in a few years.
You're
That
gonna need to
100,000.
buy that fire truck anyway.
Well, I know, and we're not gonna have the money to.
We actually do have the money. I took the liberty of reviewing the capital improvement plan in the budget document, and we have enough money right now with, I'm going to say $400,000 to spare through June 30th, 2026, before we drop below what Mr. Blum and I believe is a $4 million fund balance. So we have the money right now to buy the tower and a fire truck, and also to have a full-time fire chief and a full-time fire marshal on a continuing basis.
Well, no,
I
I
think-
know, but when we were discussing hiring a part-time person in the clerk's office, like you stated then, in the 5-year plan, we're gonna be negative. So we don't really have that money. We
So-
have that money today, but we need to look for the future. We can't just, look at today.
I totally agree that you don't buy the whole thing at one time, you put some money aside, and I thought we had put 200,000 away last time. But I am really adamant in the fact that you need a fire marshal in this city. Your iOS ratings have dropped. They used to be a 2 all the time, and they're dropped down to a 3. And you're not gonna get anything if you're not doing inspections on these buildings. It has to be done.
I'm on the same page. I think so. Let's go back to everyone's favorite topic, retirement. George is gonna retire one day,
Yes, sir.
I guess again. I've always thought, why don't we go back to police chief, and I know it's in the
Police and fire. and
charter.
change
Yeah, I
the
guess
Rich
charter.
just showed me.
But can we go back if it's in the charter?
Well, we'll
Get a
throw it up.
charter change approved by the
We could,
ballot.
we could try a vote again, but if we're gonna hire a fire chief and fire marshal, why don't we just go back to that system anyway? Seems like it's always been lopsided anyway, it's always been,
And, I mean, I'm fine if when the time comes to go back to that system. I do agree. I think that would probably be the more appropriate way to do it.
so I think I'd be in
I think
favor of
that- I
doing
think
this
that's a
now,
very
and in the
sad
future,
thing.
we throw it on the ballot, at some point, at least that's my,
I think that's a very, very sad day. I think you're really putting the city at additional risk by not having somebody do fire inspections and be able to train and also to keep the training secure. I think it's a very sad day, but if you want to say to eliminate that, then you go ahead and take your vote, and I'm going to vote
There is
nay.
no motion on the floor, Mayor.
There's no motion yet.
I know there is not.
And that was one of the biggest complaints when I came in here from the firefighters. They never had any conversation with the deputy chief because he was gone all day
Correct.
and nothing was getting done.
And it's always been that way because they
Yeah.
have so many meetings that they have to do at the state level and so forth. And
Yes.
it's a key position.
So you're saying to do it now, to have that plan for the future?
right, yeah, I mean, so if there's no vote, we fund the position, right, cause it's in the current budget, so
Yeah.
I'm good with no vote, I guess is what my
All right, and we'll have it.
position.
All right.
Then what's next?
Well, I assume you
Unless you
agree,
want to make a
Minnie?
motion?
I'm not making a motion to
I
take it
think
out.
Sarah and I were the only ones who felt like, because
But I would like to add the exercise equipment that you recommended,
Oh, yeah, I'm fine with approving the exercise equipment.
We can add that.
because the fire department does a lot of things related to,
I kind of want them to stay in shape.
she looks forward to that calendar every year.
Yes,
and you know they're listening to you, Sarah, right? You know they're listening to you. And what about their capital improvements that they had over there?
Let's see.
I didn't have any objection to any of the
Me neither.
improvements.
Now with the capital improvement, when were they gonna put that gate up to divide that from that dollar store and then and the fire department?
It's already up.
It's up? I didn't see it.
Oh, yeah,
been
it's
up for
up. It's
months.
been up. We got security lights all over the place.
Really? I
I don't
haven't
know how
seen
you
it.
missed it.
It sort of blends in.
You said
I
what
would say
now?
it does look real
It
nice.
sort of blends in. It's a real good
I
design.
haven't seen it. That's why I'm like,
Are we
black-
doing,
it's a
are we
black
doing
fence,
lexical?
is it going, is it, is
Yes.
it out? or-
With that one extra taken out.
Support plus.
And the hose is already included in that CDBG, so.
Goes all the way up to 9 mile.
My understanding is what Director presented for capital, if it's not in there, it will be in there. We'll make adjustments if necessary. I think almost everything is in there, in one place or another.
Okay. What's the next department?
Community and economic development?
Madam Mayor, could I request a 5-minute break? I think
No,
we're
you may not.
3 hours in now.
Support. No.
Make the motion.
What's the motion? I didn't
Michael
hear.
needs 5 minutes.
Yeah,
I think we-
I'm sorry, I didn't
Needs a
hear it.
break.
I moved to break till 9 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Aye.
I needed this thing.
Well, I'm still gonna pay for school.
Gee, and I'm just gonna get angrier.
We'll talk how to make this happen.
Right, right.
No, I
And then you
think,
start
I
being
think
like
we lose,
impatient.
we lose our temper on
You
the
said it
second.
before, yeah.
I know, we're all over it by now, right?
Yeah. How many more areas we got?
I guess I'm gonna turn it off so we don't forget to.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, leave it on, cause someone might want coffee.